Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Beaver and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we have a special guest on the show with us, Theo Ash, our old pal, our college classmate, a scholar who we studied the ancient Greeks alongside and now a fellow podcaster. We got a really fun show today. We're going to be ranking the 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, 1 to 32. But before we get into all of that, Theo, how the hell are you? Christmas is nigh. It is just around the corner. Are you just learning this? Yes, very exciting. What's that holding the cards for you? Are you excited?
Well, let's see. Honestly, the NFL has me working like Scrooge during Christmas. Like they
Very
got games
miserly.
on Christmas and like on Christmas Eve and like the day after Christmas. So I tell my family and my girlfriend, you can't see me this year. I'll be away in the mines,
Yeah.
watching who's even playing. I don't even know right now.
Chiefs, Steelers.
I'll be watching Broderick Jones. I'm sorry. I've
Mm.
got to I can't stay. I can't stay for dinner. So that's what Christmas is bringing to us football podcasters.
Hopefully you find your Tiny Tim. By the way, I introduced myself as Carson Beaver and you didn't even notice it. And here's the reason I did that. I've been told that in your contacts, you have me down as Carson Beaver. Are you under the impression that that's my name?
No, I have you in as Carson Brever with a V,
Oh,
not
okay.
even
I was
Beaver.
slightly
It's
misinformed.
yes. I am not under the impression that that's your name, but I also have no idea why
Yeah.
that is your name in the contacts. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
joke. I think
Mm-hmm.
I've always been aware that your last name is Bubbles with a
Right.
B. But
That's exactly right.
yeah, I don't know how that got in there like that.
Well, I'm kind of disappointed to hear that it wasn't actually Beaver because that fired me up. Logan, how are you, buddy?
Being chilling. I'm also pissed at the
Nice.
scheduling because, well, one, they're making the Steelers and I think the Ravens and the Chiefs play like 3 games in 10 days, which I think is
Yes.
asinine.
And the Texans, too.
Yeah. I think the NFL is a greedy corporation, and they just couldn't keep their hand out of the cookie jar. They just had to get on some of that Christmas NBA money, and I don't like it. We're inevitably going to get 18 games. We're inevitably going to get an 8-team playoff format. Excuse me, because it's going to make the owners more money. I'm not a big fan, but. So yeah, my Christmas gift is I get to watch
Sweet
Patrick
fellas.
Mahomes spank my Steelers on Christmas Day. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, sweet Christmas cheer, fellas. Where the hell is your whimsy? Where the hell is your merriment? It's nowhere to be found. I will say I agree. I don't like the NFL stepping on the NBA's toes with Christmas. I do think it's greedy. I do think they will continue to try to overextend themselves in every possible place to maximize revenue and the cultural currency that they hold. And that's just the way it is. I mean, there's nothing we can do to stop it. But it's too much, honestly. It is because we got 5 NBA games and 2 NFL games. Like, I can't watch all that and also enjoy the spirit of Christmas. I'm going to have to be locked in all day end to end. And frankly, I don't think that that's necessary. But enough about Christmas.
I'm gonna have 8 screens up and just fry all my dopamine receptors.
Well, that's just every day, isn't it? That's 2024, buddy. Let's talk about these quarterbacks because I think that this is going to be really interesting. Here are sort of some ground rules. We're actually going to go 32 to 1. So we'll start from the bottom and work our way up. I am viewing this in terms of who I want in a vacuum, right? So I'm trying as much as possible to take out some of the situational factors that'll influence some of these guys' statistical production and just think if I were starting a team from scratch, maybe presuming like replacement level guys around them, but just not knowing the specific situation, who do I think is the best? Who would I want? Is there anything else that you guys want to add in terms of criteria, how you're viewing this list before we get into it?
Not really. I think for me it's just about yeah, who would I want in a vacuum trying to isolate guys from their situations. It's
Mm-hmm.
tough to isolate Sam Darnold from Justin Jefferson or
Right.
Justin Herbert from Quentin Johnston on the other side of the spectrum, but I
Yeah.
do my best.
Yeah, there are some guys that this isn't going to apply for. Like I think some guys can be spoiled goods where they're too old or they've fallen off or something like that. I'm looking at this as who I would want most to suit up for me for a game like tomorrow under center. But like I said, it's not apples to apples because I think there are some guys that I think are just spoiled goods that I don't really want anything to do with. So for the most part, it's how are these guys playing right now, but there are a few instances where I think long-term implications will factor in a little bit for me.
Oh, interesting. I'm very much viewing this in terms of how good are you right now. I'm not factoring in like upside, what I think these guys have in terms of potential. You mentioned it's who you want for a game. I would probably say that it's a combination of who do I want for a regular season in totality, and then who would I want for a playoff game. I think that I would lean more on the side of valuing who do I trust most in that postseason environment. But I also think there are certain guys who are really good regular season quarterbacks who give you a floor there, who are going to give you a baseline of winning games that is valuable. And last thing I should say, we're ranking all of these quarterbacks as if every team had their best guy healthy. So it's not going to be Cooper Rush for the Cowboys. It's going to be Dak Prescott. It's not going to be Mac Jones, the great Mac Jones for the Jags. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, let's start from the bottom, fellas. Let's start in just a grimy, dark pit. Logan, do you have somebody in mind for number 32?
Yeah, dead last for me is Drew Lock right now, and unfortunately, Drew Lock's immaculate level of swag can't drag him any higher.
Yeah.
I was a longtime Drew Lock defender in terms of I thought that maybe there was something there. I think he's just a solid backup at this point, and he's a decent transition QB. But I mean, he doesn't have any like sort of terrible baggage, but I don't think there's really anything like super special. I don't get Drew Lock doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me as my QB, so he's dead last.
Theo, would you agree, or would you have somebody else at 32?
I think I would agree with that. Unfortunately, I love my boy Drew Lock, and he was a victim of bad drops in Denver and was treated so poorly, right? But not really. He should be a backup. And even when he is a backup, it seems like he is the tank commander general for the Giants, throwing pick sixes and dropping the ball and handing the Falcons a bunch of points to get them the number 1 overall pick. So if that's your body of work, I think it's fair to put you last.
I would have him last too. Never forget people last year saying that he should be starting over Geno. What a narrative that was. The production is just horrifying from him this year. Over 3 starts, he's completing under 53% of his passes. He's got a passer rating under 56. He's got 1 touchdown to 4 picks. I don't think that there's anything he does at an average level other than maybe just arm talent, but I think in terms of decision-making, pocket presence, like he is just a completely unreliable quarterback. Obviously in a bad situation, but even for that bad situation, he's looked really bad. So I would have him dead last. 31, Logan, we'll just keep you leading off. We'll keep going in this same rotation. Who would you have next?
I went to bat for this guy for a long time. I have Mason Rudolph at 31, and some people might have Will Levis because they think he's better. I don't think Will Levis is better than Mason Rudolph. I've seen enough from Will Levis where I'm completely out on the guy at this point. It has nothing really to do with the physical attributes, right? The dude's swole up. He's a handsome guy. He's got a big arm, can move, but
Sure.
I don't think Will Levis has a brain, and unfortunately, I am going to hold that against him. I just think that he's brainless. And with Rudolph, like, don't get me wrong, man, there's nothing special about Mason Rudolph, but he can connect on a deep ball every once in a while. That one he hit to Calvin Ridley, the only points they had for the majority of that game was nice. Rudolph can throw a deep ball. He can be a decent spot starter for you. And I just trust him a little bit more than Drew Lock to do, remedial stuff. But there's nothing really special about Mason. But the difference between them, Mason's just safer. With Will Levis, I always feel like there's something catastrophic creeping around the corner where he's about to have something disastrous happen and, cost you a football game.
Theo, who do you have here?
I'll go with Deshaun Watson. Probably should be in last, honestly.
Do you think he's the best? I don't even have him on my list. Do you think he's the best Browns QB?
I mean, he's the starting Browns
That's fair.
QB, so I put him on as their guy. And he is, I mean, it's a valid question. Is he better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson? Is he better than Jameis Winston? I mean, those guys are very stinky, but
Right.
they might still be better options for Cleveland than Deshaun Watson. I mean, it was just a question of, does this offense get like historically bad? Does it get like worst of all time level bad? That was the question when he was the starter. He takes sacks at a extreme level. Like you're lucky if he takes like 4 in a game. That's atrocious. His release has gotten slower and slower over the years. He doesn't read the field. He just is. I don't know what he practices, honestly. Like I don't want to know how he spends his time, but I know that it's not on the playbook or on like mechanics or anything like that, because it's clear that they just get worse and worse every year.
So this is tricky what we do with the Browns, because I think that Jameis is the best quarterback in that room, but I also think that the Browns intend to start Deshaun Watson when he's healthy. So I think I'm going to include Deshaun. If Jameis were on this list, I would have him at 28. I actually did map that out. I would have him a few spots higher. I think I have Deshaun at number 31 as well, though. I mean, he's just completely destructive to an offense outside of still being like a pretty good athlete. There's nothing of value he brings, and even with that athleticism, like it doesn't keep him from having this monstrous sack rate, 13.5%. Like 1 to every 7-8 dropbacks, Deshaun Watson is taking a sack. That's unbelievable. Jameis obviously is playing with the same offensive line in front of him, and he's more than halved that sack rate. And then the accuracy is just horrible. The decision-making, the processing, like he's truly become an awful quarterback. And I thought that he was a disaster this entire season when he was healthy. So I'll have him 31. I'll have Mason Rudolph at 30. I don't think there's a lot good to say about Mason. He's big. He's kind of sneaky good at avoiding sacks, actually. But he still makes a lot of mistakes for being a guy that you sort of think of as being more of a safe quarterback. I mean, he's got 8 picks and just a few starts. This year he's thrown as many picks as touchdowns. There's really not much to like with Rudolph at all, but he's not as cancerous to an offense as this version of Deshaun Watson, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wouldn't have Deshaun on my list whatsoever. And I mean, it has to do with the on-field stuff as well, but I do factor like leadership in there. And I think Deshaun's like probably the worst leader at the quarterback spot, like along with all the myriad of, on the field stuff that he's just horrible at football now. I don't want anything to do with the guy.
So you're just going with who you think is best, Logan. You're
and
not
I think
going with
Jameis
who
is
you think that team views as the starter. I agree, Jameis.
Yeah, I think
better,
Jameis
but I
is
think
better.
the Browns view Deshaun as the starter.
I agree.
I
and
mean,
I
if Jameis is their third quarterback right now, they're starting DTR over him.
Unfortunately, I think next year the Browns will probably lull themselves into starting Deshaun again next year, even though that is the completely wrong answer. And what I think this is probably going to lead them to losing Myles Garrett on a bigger scale, unfortunately. I think it's going to be the ripple effects from that. It's probably the worst deal of all time.
So who do you have in the prestigious number 30 spot, Logan?
So I do have a guy that I've gone to bat for a long time. I have Gardner Minshew at 30.
You got
I think
boys down here. You got your quirked up white boys down here.
I do. I like Drew Lock swag. I like Gardner Minshew swag. He fires me up a little bit. Like I can imagine. I don't know. Gardner Minshew would just fire me up if I saw him. And yeah, he brings a certain bit of fire to the table. It's kind of like Jameis. I have these guys right beside one another. I have Gardner and Minshew. I have Minshew at 30, Winston at 29. And these guys are both guys that I feel like on given games can throw a really strong punch. They can have really good games for you. Jameis a little more so than Gardner. I actually think Jameis can have outstanding games. The one against Baltimore this year, amazing. The one against Pittsburgh this year, Jameis made all the clutch plays in big third and fourth down situations. That being said, they can also completely throw you out of a game. We know that reality with Minshew and Winston both. Minshew's really bad at protecting the football in the pocket. He's always struggled with fumbles and sacks. And Winston, same deal. Winston, it's more with just, I'm going to just let this thing fly and throw a pick. So these are big swing guys to me. They can win you games, but they can also throw you out of them. And normally it's worse than it is good. So that's why they're here for me.
Theo, who would you have at 30?
I'll probably go with, I had Levis written down, but it doesn't really matter, him or Rudolph. I mean, Rudolph is definitely your safer option. That guy is just a turret, right? Big dude in the pocket, like kind of lumbering around, and he can step up and stuff like that, but doesn't really have the big arm or anything like that. And then there's Levis, who's, I think, started more games for them this year.
Yeah.
Has some nice moments, certainly, but just too many mistakes. And he had one in the most recent game that he started that just killed any remaining enthusiasm that I had about him. But just because he's started more and I didn't really know who to pick between the two of them, I'll go with Levis. at
That's
number
fair.
3.
Theo has the representative from the Tennessee delegation, no matter what, who honestly I think either way probably belongs in this spot. I don't even know who I prefer. I guess I slightly prefer Rudolph between the two, but Levis does have more ability. He also is like the most backbreakingly stupid quarterback in football. Just makes truly catastrophic mistakes that I don't think anybody else can even compare to. So I'm going to go with Logan's boy Gardner at number 29 because I have Mason in my number 30 spot. I think that Gardner has more juice than a Mason Rudolph or a Drew Lock. I think that he's capable of higher highs, but he is a turnover machine. 14 turnovers in 10 games this year. Really bad. But again, there's some positive stuff with him, right? He can move. He's actually pretty accurate. And so I prefer him. And this is honestly probably the worst season that he's had, but he's very clearly in this bottom tier no matter what.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's one of those guys that if you want him to be a game manager, like in Indianapolis, he can win you 8 games, but he's not going to elevate you beyond anything else.
Okay, Logan, who do you have next?
Well, and then so I have Jameis here at 29, and the highs with Jameis are very good. And I like Jameis as a leader. The guy can talk his ass off, right? He'd be a great preacher or a great pastor. Like, I love listening to Jameis. I love all the sound bites. And if I was in a locker room, he would get me fired up. I would go into battle for Jameis Winston. That being said, he's got the 30-30 season, man. It's Jameis is like the embodiment of the yin-yang symbol, the black and white. It's like
inside you there are two wolves type beat.
It pick six. And that's Jameis. That's Jameis Winston in a nutshell. He is a flip of a coin every game, every play, every snap.
Theo, who's next for you?
Let me get Desmond Ridder.
Whoa, you're riding the Ritter bus, huh? Spawn
I
hours.
might as well go down with the
got you with
ship.
the
I've done it
propaganda.
enough, and he's got enough of a case as the Raiders starter or sort of starter for at least one game this season. I do believe he might be their best quarterback, which the bar is in hell there. I kind of liked what I saw out of him in the Raiders game, or in the not the Raiders game, in the Falcons game, in the revenge game. He hit some hole shots. He used his legs to convert on third down. I'm like, that's why I had a second round grade on him as a prospect, man.
Yeah, it's a hell of a quarterback room they've got. Can we all agree that AOC is the worst? I think he's just terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a dogfight on who's the best and who's the worst, but I think I would put AOC at the bottom. He is again a total statue, not a ton of arm talent. Just doesn't make great reads. Like at least with Ritter, you could like run him on 4th and 3 and pick it up.
Right. All right, we're moving out of the bottom 5, but we're not there just yet. Logan, who do you have at 28?
28 is my nemesis, Derek Carr. I have him here. And,
Whoa.
You know, it's only because it's really because of two things. I think Derek Carr can really operate a play action system well, and when the running game's going, he can hit on these shot plays. We saw it early in the year with him in Shaheed. Derek Carr just sucks in the red zone. He's never been a guy that can put the ball in the end zone, and that's my problem with him. Yeah, sure, he can give me 40 yards on a drive. We're gonna get a field goal. I don't want field goals. I want points. And Derek Carr is turnover prone, and he can't get it done in the red zone. I just think he's mediocre. He is like the embodiment of a quarterback for a 7-9 or an 8-8 team now in today's NFL. 8-9 or 7-10, vice versa. But there's just nothing that wows me about Derek, and he's not going to lead you to wins. When you need Derek Carr, he's going to crumble.
Theo?
I've got Bo Nix.
My guy.
Which is pretty low, but really when you stack up all the quarterbacks, I just don't know how he couldn't fall in this range. He doesn't have a lot that's positive about his game right now outside of just kind of quickness, I'd say, and he can kind of dart forward and pick up first downs. You can roll him out. He's somewhat accurate on the move as well. So, like, there's kind of an element of, like, shiftiness to his game and speed and scrambling. But as a thrower, I don't think there's a ton to like. Maybe, again, quickness of release, something like the aesthetic value of him throwing it. But his arm talent is really low level. And when it comes to him testing downfield. You saw it on that double move in the Chargers game, how that was just an absolute balloon that touched the ceiling and died short. Against the Colts, he, tried to test tight coverage a couple times, and pretty much every single time it was picked off. I mean, he did have some touchdowns downfield in that game, but they were designer plays against cover three that were just kind of wide open, that I don't think took a lot of ability to hit. In other games, like the Ravens game, for example, the footwork kind of killed him, like coming into a full run in the pocket and losing accuracy due to that. I know he doesn't take a ton of sacks, but I do think that's just because Peyton moves the pocket so much for him, where it's like he can always just kind of throw the ball away because he's booting out or something like that, more than like his pocket presence just being unreal. I mean, the Chiefs game, he took 2 sacks that were like 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage because he ran straight backwards.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a lot of consistent good from him over the course of this year. And he doesn't have crazy tools as a thrower. I mean, he's got some nice things. So I think he's been inconsistent. He hasn't showed me a lot of super high-end throws. I know that the 90-something yard touchdown to Marvin Mims was nice. He had a nice in-breaker versus Atlanta. That was cool. But, like, you can count the throws that really get me excited about Bo Nix this season on just about maybe 2 hands.
Sure. Yeah, I have been a little bit conflicted with where exactly I want to put Bo. I have him somewhere in this 26 to 28 range, and I'll tell you guys the 2 other quarterbacks who I have, who I'm considering where exactly I want to place them. It's Anthony Richardson and it's Bryce Young. I think the thing that's difficult with AR is I am way higher on him long-term than I am on Bo, and I think when you talk about wow moments, right, what Bo is lacking, Anthony Richardson has in abundance. I mean, he's made some of the best plays we've seen this season, and he's made some of the worst plays that we've seen this season. And I do think that some of his value to an offense goes underappreciated by some of these conventional metrics. Like, obviously, everybody's fixated on his completion percentage, which is horrible. And he is a terribly inaccurate quarterback right now. He's easily the most inaccurate starter in football. He also averages the most yards per completion, right? And when it comes to hitting on those big shot plays, he's been one of the better guys that we've seen. And he's obviously one of the most effective rushing quarterbacks. So I'm very much conflicted between the highs that you get from Anthony Richardson, and I don't think you get highs with Bo at all individually, but I do think that Bo can functionally run an NFL offense right now. He can execute a system, and AR really can't do that week to week. I mean, he has his impressive drives and his impressive games, but then the next drive or the next game, he's just as liable to go out there and miss a guy by 10 yards on an intermediate throw that leads to a pick. He's got 15 turnovers this year to 14 total touchdowns. And then Bryce, I think, has been more impressive than Bo as of late, but it is pretty marginal. I think that Bryce has made more throws and has probably had more moments that legitimately impress me. I think that we've seen him do a little bit more as a scrambler recently than we saw previously, like this past week, right? He had 68 yards on the ground. I think that he's shown some really nice ball placement, especially this past week. He had a beautiful ball to David Moore along the left sideline for that touchdown, just a really nicely placed moon ball. Bo does have more physical tools, though. I mean, I think that arm strength for both of them is a big issue, but Bo is at least bigger. And like Bryce, as fun as it is, as much as we're all loving it, like you look at his production since he came back as the starter, and if we just look at that time, the last 8 weeks, he's 206 yards per game, 10 touchdowns, 6 picks, 83 passer rating. Obviously, the weapons are bad, but the run game's really good. The line is very solid. I'm struggling here. I think I'm going to go Bo at number 28. I think he does the least at a high level of any of these guys. And just to add some more context to that, Theo, I thought you did a really nice job of breaking down some of his limitations. But I know there are people who are really, really high on Bo. I just think he's in such a favorable situation in a lot of ways that don't get discussed enough because people look at the weapons, and obviously the weapons don't jump out at you. Cortland Sutton's really good, but outside of that, it's a group of relatively unknown guys. But I do think Sean Payton is such a great play caller, especially at covering up for some of Bo's limitations. I think the offensive line in front of him, I mean, you mentioned his low sack rate. To me, that is hugely an offensive line thing, right? He doesn't get pressured very much. I don't think that Bo deals with pressure well. His arm talent is bad. He's not accurate. Like, this is the incredible thing. Out of 34 qualified quarterbacks, Bo Nix this year ranks 31st in completed air yards per completion. I read off all these stats just a couple shows ago, so bear with me for a second. But he's also 29th in on-target throw percentage. So to me, having that combination of being that conservative, of having that many throws that are deliberately behind the line of scrimmage, right? He's hit on some big shot plays, but his depth of target on average is quite short, or at least on completions, I should say. When he throws the ball downfield, it tends to be a very risky thing. And then to also struggle that much with accuracy, like, that's a really bad indicator. And he's 30th in passing yards per attempt overall. So I do think he's better than the quarterback that he was early in this year. I mean, certainly, right? He really, really struggled over those first few weeks. But I also think that Bryce is significantly better. I think that AR, it is more of a week-to-week thing. But I think that I prefer his ceiling. It's really close. I'm going to go Bo at 28, though.
Yeah, this flows nicely. I have Bo at 27, and the thing that's been most puzzling about Bo is just how undisciplined he's been. You figured when you draft this guy, right, that he's the most experienced college player ever. He's started more games at quarterback in college than any player. I think it's been broken since by Dylan Gabriel, but Bo was started more games than anybody in college football history, and so you expect this guy's going to be pro-ready, he can step right in here, run a system. And, Theo, you talked about the sacks where he's taking 20-yard sacks. I can count I might need 3 hands to count the amount of sacks where Bo is just falling down in the pocket and taking sacks, like where pressure's bearing down on him. The footwork doesn't get me because, again, you expect with a guy with this much game experience that he would be sound mechanically. And so while he's inconsistent at like borderline stuff, he also doesn't bring you any of the wow factor like you're talking about with an Anthony Richardson. And that is why Bo is down here for me. And I don't love him under pressure. I like Bryce Young considerably more under pressure when he's dealing with guys getting in his face. And again, that's been more of a trend over the last couple of weeks. But I buy into that way more than I do with Bo. I think Bo can get better. And that's what I think a lot of people, because Carson, you always talk about how you think he's at his ceiling. I think Bo can get to a level where he's a below average starter in this league and like solid. But again, when you're so limited by, he's never going to be a great deep ball thrower where he's hitting on these massive shot plays. He's never going to be a threat as a runner like an Anthony Richardson. And so that's where I'm at with Bo. He's going to have to get good at the regular stuff to be a solid quarterback, and he's never going to bring you any of that crazy wow stuff. So I've got Bo at 27. I think it's the right spot for him.
I do want to be clear. I don't think that Bo is at his ceiling. I just think he is quite close to his ceiling. For a rookie, I think he's about as close to one ceiling as is possible because of the lack of high-end physical traits, right? I mean, he's a decent mover, but the arm talent is very limiting overall, right? He's an unremarkable athlete at the quarterback position, and he's almost 25 years old. And I do think that the situation that he's been put in has been underrated by a lot of people in terms of how crucial it is to his success. So, Theo, who would you have one spot above Bo?
I'd probably put Anthony Richardson. It's close between the two of them, and the game that they played against each other kind of decided this for me. I will put Anthony Richardson one spot above him. The accuracy is debilitating. I mean, on straight drop back throws, he's like a solid 15% lower completing passes or just being accurate than the next worst guy. He's a total outlier in terms of how much he misses. But just watching that Broncos versus Colts game, it's easy to see the flashes with Richardson, and it's easy to see how comfortable he is in an NFL pocket. It's still the thing that charms me with him, and it's the thing that's always charmed me with him, is the walls can really be closing in on him, and it just doesn't really faze him at all. He'll step into the smallest crease. He'll stiff arm somebody and like jump backwards and throw. He just doesn't really care about the defensive rushers around him because he's bigger, stronger, faster than all of them, and he can make them miss in just ridiculous ways. He can buck them off of his back. He can, outrun them. He can out-physical them. He's crazy good at it. And in that Broncos game, there were many times where I thought he maneuvered pressure and he threw into the teeth of the defense, and he made a great play in structure. I think you need some of these physical tools to be a great in-structure player as well as a great out-of-structure player. And I think that's the thing that always confuses some people, like when I don't like Tua or I don't like Purdy or I don't like, whoever, Knicks, and people get on me like, well, you just fall in love with the physical tools and the out of
Mm-hmm.
structure stuff. It's like I fall in love with the physical tools and the in structure stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you need a certain baseline of athleticism to be really, really good in structure as well as out of structure. And I think I've seen that with Richardson, and I think he can be a good case study of that, where it's like, even though he's so inaccurate, even though he's really struggled to be, even just a starter in general in the league right now, his athleticism opens up so much. He can hold
Yeah.
people in the running game. He can step up into crowded pockets. He can push the ball downfield. There's a lot that he can do that still intrigues me. And I do think, I mean, he's still super young. He still hasn't started, maybe just now he has, but he's barely started, if he has, a full season's worth of game. Being fully out on Richardson would be like being fully out on Caleb Williams or Bo Nix or, Drake May. I'm sure doesn't have that great of stats. I haven't checked in a while. I just think that there's a lot of time left in his career.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think that that's been the crazy thing about how everybody's discussed Anthony Richardson. Like, you take the youngest guy in the draft, who, I mean, still this season has been the youngest starting quarterback with the least experience, with the most insane physical tools, but also obviously being the most raw. And you expect that guy to be a good, consistent quarterback in year 2 when he only started 4 games in year 1. Like, to me, that's just always been crazy. And people early in the year were, again, hyper fixated on the completion percentage, and they were saying you can't run a functional NFL offense with this guy. We got to go to Flacco. But like, you look at the numbers, and the offense was equally successful with either quarterback out there. And then obviously Flacco was actually really bad when he came back as the starter. But like, I think people underestimate the impact that he does have in the run game and how pivotal he is to Indianapolis being one of the elite rushing attacks in football. I think that people can underrate how great he is at evading pressure and avoiding sacks. I'm still going to have him in my 27 spot, and I'm going to put Bryce at 26. Those guys were really close for me. But I do think that Bryce has just shown an ability to construct drives with a consistency that Anthony Richardson hasn't. And even though I think that the ceiling with Anthony Richardson is monumentally higher, like, this list for me is just about who do I think is better right now. And I think Bryce has shown enough of that high level processing of making those more big time throws into some tighter windows than we've seen from a Bo, for example, if you're comparing dudes who obviously don't have Richardson's physical tools. So I'm going to give Bryce that edge. Logan, who's up next for you?
Yeah, I've got Bryce in this spot. I actually have Richardson a few spots higher, and maybe
Oh,
this is a logical fallacy or just because my criteria might be a little different. I am looking a little bit ahead with some of these guys, and like, I just so much prefer Anthony Richardson's physical profile to a Bryce. So like, it may be close between them for like a game or something like that, but I'm so in on Richardson being great down the line that I do have him higher on this list. So
ooh,
Bryce is up next for me. I really like what we've seen over the past few weeks, and he just looks. We talked about it last night, but he's way more calm. He's way more collected. He's dealing with pressure so much better. He's getting out of the pocket and making plays with his legs. Like, Bryce is in control, and that's the biggest thing to me. From the biggest difference from the start of the year, Bryce was out of control. He was not confident in himself. He was crumbling every snap, and this guy looks like he can run an NFL offense to a decent level. I think Bryce can be an average to a below average starter in the league. I think you can win games with the guy, and I like his processing. I like his feel. I like what we've seen in this recent stretch, but kind of similar to Bo Nix, I think Bryce is limited by his physicals a little bit, and that's what keeps
yeah,
him
definitely.
from really being higher on this list.
So, Logan, you have Bryce at 26. I have Bryce at 26. And by the way, I totally agree. Like, you can't really overstate the physical tool thing, obviously. Like, this was a guy who early in the year we saw have to, like, get up on his tippy toes to try to see over his O-line and get a ball out. Obviously, we've never seen a quarterback this small who's this physically limited go number 1 overall. And I think that that does still put a pretty hard ceiling on Bryce, unfortunately. But, I mean, he's overcome mental stuff that was also giving him trouble early in the year. So, Theo, are you in that same club? Who do you have in your 26th spot?
I realize I got to put a Falcons QB here somewhere, and I guess it's Penix.
Okay.
Um, I'll put him here. I mean, we've seen one start, so it's really tough to talk about him, but I did like
Yeah.
what I saw. he looked like a vet to me. He just looked very much like I forgot I was watching a rookie in terms of what he is good at and maybe what he's not so good at as well. Like everything with him was so detailed in structure, I think, in terms of like getting through his reads, climbing the pocket, like keeping a wide base, throwing away from defenders' leverages downfield and protecting his wide receivers. I thought all of that was really nuanced and detailed and good with him. But obviously, he's not going to be like the great, bail out, make somebody miss, like throw and maybe that's what you expect like a splash play from a rookie to be. He didn't deliver those, but he did deliver like kind of nuanced veteran pocket presence vibes. So I liked that from him. I liked what I saw early. We'll see how it goes going forward. He still has one of the world's ugliest throwing motions, fucking leaning like he does. I don't like that. He like sometimes can like lean his torso and like look like a C when he throws, on top of the fact that he's lefty, on top of the fact he's throwing it sidearm. I'm like, what am I even looking at here? I can see it maybe causing some accuracy issues that are more severe than it looked at versus the Giants. But I thought he looked solid, and I think he's a better player than Kirk Cousins. So I'll put him on this list here and keep Cousins off of it.
I actually have Penix a couple spots higher, and he's the toughest guy to rank, right, because we've only seen the one start. But we talked about his debut yesterday, and I felt like I was a little too low on it. I said that it was basically average, unremarkable, but I don't know that I gave enough credit for like how impressive it is in some ways to, as a rookie, have your debut be unremarkable, if that makes sense. Like, I think it's what you laid out there, Theo, like just how comfortable he looked. There were no chaotic plays with him running that offense. I thought that how he dealt with pressure was impressive. I thought that he was accurate. I thought that his timing was good. I thought that he took what the defense gave him. Like, he was just really exceptionally composed for being a rookie. Now, obviously, he's a 24-year-old rookie, right? He's got tons of college experience, just like Bo does. So it's another thing where I think some people are being very exuberant about his ceiling based on the debut, and I don't think that I would go there because of some of the physical tools and age stuff that doesn't bode as well for like big time growth. But right now, I'll just say it. I have him one spot above Caleb Williams, who's in my 25 spot, which again, it's tough to say based on the one game, but as high as I am on Caleb, and I think he's going to be one of the elite quarterbacks in this league, there's just so much more room for growth, but I think there's also some areas in which Penix is already very polished that Caleb is not at all. Like, I think Caleb's accuracy to me has probably been the biggest challenge that I didn't fully anticipate, because we've heard all the stuff pre-draft about, oh, well, let's see how he deals with NFL time to throw, right? He's not going to be the best athlete on the field anymore. He can't go around and do all this Houdini magician stuff. And like, to some extent that has been an issue for him. He has held onto the ball a little long. He has missed some opportunities that you'd like him to take. But I think some people have maybe overstated it. Like, his average time to throw is 2.9 seconds. It varies game to game, but that's been an issue, not the biggest one, though, to me. The biggest one is probably he's 30th in on-target throw percentage, and there's just been some opportunities downfield. I mean, there's been some opportunities on some short intermediate throws where, like, he's just missing guys, and I do trust Penix's accuracy more. I also think the Bears have been disastrous on third down. I think that Caleb has some responsibility in that. But, of course, the situation hasn't been good with that offensive line, with the play calling, which I guess has gotten better under Thomas Brown compared to Shane Waldron, but like that offense has still really been struggling. But he has also cut down on the bad stuff, right? I mean, he's basically stopped throwing picks. He's got 19 touchdowns to 5 picks on the year. I think that that's impressive from him. He's not making those back-breaking mistakes at all, but he's also not doing as much positive stuff as maybe I would have expected, like to see, and really as this offense would need from him. So I'm going to be somebody who fundamentally believes in Caleb and defends him when people try to say, oh, this guy sucks. This guy's such a massive disappointment. And I do think, obviously, like, he has the potential to make really special plays out of structure. That's something that I'm banking on him being elite at long term. And we've seen him make some real big plays with his legs. But, like, consistency has been a really big issue for him this year. And although we've only seen one start, I definitely think Penix is going to be more consistent. So Caleb's probably the dude who I expect to take the single biggest leap from where I have him today to where I have him in 2 years. But right now I have him at 25.
Yeah, I didn't know how the young quarterbacks are the toughest to rank. So after this next guy, I have like just a crop of young QBs, basically that I have in here that are we don't really know what they're going to look like as finished products. I have Caleb way higher just because I do believe in him. I have Penix higher as well, just one spot. I do like what we saw from Penix in his debut. I thought he was the most pro-ready guy in the draft, and I think you see some of that on display. The accuracy, throwing in between zones, like he really did look really poised for a rookie. I'm not the highest on his ceiling. I think long-term you're looking at a guy who could be like a slightly better Tua. And I think that's a good quarterback. I think that is a really good quarterback, but I'm not the highest on his ceiling. I got a feeling you guys are really going to push back against this, especially you probably, Theo. At number 25, I have Aaron Rodgers just because I want nothing to do with the guy. I think he's a bad leader. I think his arm is shot relatively. I don't think the guy can move anymore, and I would really be surprised if he plays football past this year. So it's not really fully an ability thing. There is a little bit of projection involved with this, but like I don't want Aaron Rodgers. It's really as simple as that. Like I have him firmly in this Derek Carr tier. I don't want you under center for me anymore.
Just get out. I don't blame you for that. I mean, he's been a terrible leader, I feel like, and he's pushed a lot of young players away, and just in general, the way he conducts himself is just messy for team building. So I understand just being like, you're not good enough to invite this circus. But I do think in a vacuum, he ranks higher for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think compared to like these dudes who we're talking about, right? Like Caleb, just some of the things that Caleb does that can really hurt an offense as much as he has the tools to help an offense with the special stuff that you expect him to be more consistent with down the line, like the accuracy, like holding on to the ball, like the sack rate, right? I mean, he's got a bad line in front of him, but also I think Caleb needs to do a better job of not taking as many sacks as he has. It's been a disappointing year from Rodgers, and he actually hasn't been super accurate. I feel like that's been the biggest surprise for me is just him missing throws, because obviously you don't expect him to do much out of structure in terms of mobility, but the fact that he has missed some throws to me has been uncharacteristic of the Rodgers that we've seen before. But I still have him a few spots higher than this. I mean, the physical limitations are obvious, but he can still spin that thing decently well, and he still thinks the game at a pretty damn high level. So, like, I understand what you're saying about the locker room aspect, but if we're just looking right now, like I need somebody to go out there and win me a game, Caleb versus Aaron Rodgers, like I'm taking Aaron Rodgers. Penix versus Aaron Rodgers, I'm taking Aaron Rodgers. I also think you're crazy low on Derek Carr. I know that you hate Derek Carr.
Derek Carr
but like,
sucks, dude. Derek Carr can't
he's not good.
Derek
He's certainly not good. But is he worse than Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, Bo Nix, all these guys that you're trying to win a game today?
Yeah, I don't want Derek Carr. He's going to lose you the game. Derek Carr injures himself. Like, dude, that was the funniest concussion. I hate laughing at people like that.
This dude is going to laugh at his brain trauma now.
I've never seen a guy try to hurdle on the sideline, and then he doesn't put his hands out to stop his fall. He's just like, you know what, I'm going to just let the front of my head take this.
You could break your hands. He's protecting his hands.
He broke his hands too, didn't he?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's a great point. He still did on that play.
He broke his wrist.
I just think I know what Derek Carr is gonna. It's gonna be 13-17. His defense kept him in the game the whole way. There's 3 minutes on the clock. I need a game-winning drive. He's gonna march me down to the 50, and then he's gonna throw a pick, or he's gonna throw 3 straight incompletions. Derek Carr sucks, man. Like I wish he didn't. He just sucks.
I don't think you wish he didn't at all. I think you're thrilled that he sucks. Look, man, I'm not going to sit here and defend Derek Carr, but I do have him at number 23. Like, he is, at the end of the day, a vet. He is a really good play-action quarterback. He does throw a pretty accurate ball.
Is it close to you between Kirk and Derek Carr?
Yeah, it's close.
Because I'm out on Kirk, too.
I have Carr and Penix. I'm out on all these dudes, but I think maybe you're doing more projecting than I am. Like, of course, I think Anthony Richardson is going to be better than Derek Carr. I think Caleb Williams is going to be a million times better than Derek Carr. Do I think they're better than him right now? No, like Derek Carr can run a pretty solid NFL offense. I think his passer rating this year is still over 100, right? I mean, he's 15 touchdowns, 5 picks. Like, he can be efficient as a passer. Of course, he's totally limited out of structure. He's totally not somebody you want to carry your offense. His arm talent is just fine. He's going to throw some hospital balls. Like, all this can be true, and he can still be way more dependable than these literal rookies and second-year guys. I think a little bit of your Derek Carr bias is showing here. What do you think, Theo?
I can't believe you're disrespecting PFF's 6th rated passer like this.
Is that true?
You're lying.
Wow.
No. Wow. No, I'm not lying. I mean, I don't really have any love for Derek Carr, and watching him play. His footwork at this stage of his career is still like hilariously bad for like how successful of a career that he's had. He's never won anything important. He doesn't score touchdowns in the red zone like you're saying, but I've seen enough like pretty posts to like Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, okay, he's probably like 20 something. I don't know, but
Agreed.
he's not. I would not want him as my quarterback whatsoever. So I'm not really gonna come to his defense too much.
Understandable. I don't think there's a lot of Derek Carr defenders out there at this point, but somebody has to stand up against him being number 28, and I'm going to be the man to do it. So we're kind of bouncing around a little bit here, but Theo, let's get back to your list. Who is the next quarterback for you? We just had Penix for you, right, at 26?
Yeah. So next I've got Caleb, who has been, I feel like, wildly different quarterbacks just kind of week to week here.
Yeah.
I mean, the accuracy has kind of been the lack thereof has kind of been the common thread throughout this year. But I feel like sometimes he's made a really conscious decision to like stay on his spot and just like throw quick game over and over again. And then like some games he's really scrambling too much. Totally. But I just don't think he's really put a game together from the first quarter through the fourth that's like good in a while. Maybe he did it versus like Carolina. They played the Panthers at one point, and that was a pretty good game for him. But just in general, he's been very, inconsistent with his decision making. He's held the ball for probably way too long. He is trying to create, and I think he's looked good, like making people miss and like running around. Like there's been some like USC moments from him this year where it's like, man, he just ran around and made the entire backfield miss. But then is he delivering a good throw after that? Like, no, that's not happening this year. So in general, I think he's struggled to play with any kind of pace or rhythm, or like he hasn't built momentum or like stacked good games at any point this year. Doesn't mean they're not coming. I wish his center wouldn't get like steamrolled comically every single game. I wish his wide receivers didn't straight up quit on him in the middle of the year. I wish it wasn't Keenan Allen running like deep overs versus man coverage for like a lot of this year, or him like throwing screens to DJ Moore with no blockers in front of him. There's been like a whole laundry list of issues, but at the same time, I don't think Caleb in a vacuum has played that great. So
agreed. I think there's been a lot working against him, but he's definitely still had some self-inflicted issues, and the consistency really has been what's missing, right? I mean, even half to half, you'll see like...
Yeah, like the Lions game from Thanksgiving, right? The first half, like nothing could go their way. He had plenty of bad moments, and then the second half, you're like, holy cow, look at all these great throws. He's made some magician plays, like he's shifting around in structure. It's beautiful, but in the same game, it's like, how do you miss this read? Like, how do you take that sack?
The one thing I will give him credit for is even though he's not winning these games, like, I do think the guy's been clutch, and I do think that in big moments, he's maintained his composure and his calm. Like, you think about the Lions game, leading them back in that one. You think about, well, obviously, the way that one ended was insane, but I think that was on both him and Eberflus. But, like, in totality in the second half, against the Vikings, now the overtime possession in that game, he takes a bad sack that you didn't want him to. But before that, he was really nails in that second half. It's just, again, consistency. Like, there are so many games where you look up and you're in the third quarter and the Bears have 3 points and 76 yards, and you're like, what the hell? And it's like the situation can be bad, but also Caleb isn't overcoming it as much as I would have hoped coming into this year. So I feel like I've jumped ahead a little with my list. I had Caleb 25, Penix 24, Carr 23. Logan, who's next on your list? In what spot?
So I've got Penix at 24. I already gave my
Okay.
spiel on him. I still have Caleb a few spots higher. And just to be clear about this portion of my list, it is just the young quarterback portion and guys that I would want the most. There are some young quarterbacks that are already higher than in this group because I would trust them to start a game for me right now. The only thing I want to add on Caleb, you know how the Bo Nix narrative got twisted when the Broncos started rattling off wins? I really do wonder if we would be looking at Caleb through a different scope if some of those results had ended differently, right? If Tyreek Stevenson doesn't lose his marbles on the final game against the Commanders, right? If they eke out that game against Green Bay, right? Because they were in that one. If they win the one, basically their division gauntlet, over the past few weeks, if they could have won that game against Green Bay, Minnesota, and Detroit. Like, I don't want to just gift him victories, but Caleb put them in position to win those games.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
probably should have came away with a few more dubs. I agree with you, though. I think the accuracy is concerning, but I'm such a strong believer, and I think I speak for all of us. I think Caleb's going to figure it out. I think he's going to be great. And all the things that you guys listed off, I think Caleb might be the hardest quarterback to rank on this list just because of how much of a dumpster fire the Bears are. Like, the Bears are so comically bad at tending to young quarterbacks and setting them up for success. Like, Mitch Trubisky was never going to be good because he always sucked. But Justin Fields, right, I think they could have figured it out if they had set him up for success. Caleb, I still feel the same way that they're failing him more than – like, Caleb's not been good. I will be clear about that. He has not looked great end to end. He's had really high highs. He's also had really low lows. But I also don't think the Bears are optimizing or setting him up for success. So that's what I think makes it hard to rank Caleb. But I've got Caleb a few spots higher. I've got Penix at 24, and then I've got some other young QBs above him.
Okay, Theo, who's in that 24 spot for you?
So next I've got, I think it's Carr. Yeah,
Okay.
it's Carr.
Very fair.
And
I
then,
have Carr one spot higher.
And then I've got, and I am deciding here at the last second who I'm going to say. I'm just going to stick with what I wrote down. I have Baker after that.
Oh, my.
I think that Baker Mayfield is bad. I do not like him as a franchise quarterback at all, even with the season that he's having.
Wow.
Logan,
Make your case, and Logan is just probably going to be despondent
Logan?
for the rest of the show.
I'm sorry, but I hate watching Baker Mayfield play. I will be upfront about this. The jitteriness of his feet and just the way he goes about like playing the quarterback position, the random like straight up spin moves that I'll see him hit on nobody this year.
So sick.
I just do not like it. He has been one of the worst quarterbacks pushing the ball past 10 yards. I think that he has gotten his career resuscitated by Canales and by now Liam Cohen and a really good run game this year and like some good weapons. But I just cannot find myself respecting
Theo,
Baker's game. I don't like the mechanics. I don't like him pushing the ball. I don't like the decision making. I don't think he's that different than like a Derek Carr or.
Theo, I love you as a human being. I love you and your football acumen.
Here we
I
go.
think this is your worst take of all time. You're just wrong. I think you're just wrong. I don't. I mean, the thing is, Baker last year was basically the Bucs' entire offense. They couldn't run the ball between the tackles. It was him leading the charge every game to Evans and Godwin. And I agree with you a little bit about the Bucs point. I think Canales was brilliant, and I think you're finally seeing him and Bryce Young put it together in Carolina and really mesh well. And I'm excited for that union moving forward. I think Liam Cohen is brilliant. Some of the route concepts that they put together, like, I think it is an optimal situation for Baker. I think it's better than last year. It's way better than last year.
Yeah.
They can run the ball this year with Tucker, with White, with Bucky, right, whoever it is in the backfield. I think their line is improved. I think Graham Barton is an absolute stud for Tampa Bay. And I think their wide receiver cores are pretty good, from Evans to Godwin to Cade Otton to McMillan, who's been making plays. And some other guys. For a large portion of this year, Mike Evans was out. Chris Godwin missed some time too. This offense still kept humming, and it might not be pretty, but I think Baker's a playmaker, man. I think Baker elevates guys. I think he makes players on this team better. I think he is a bona fide, just playmaker. Like, he's made way more plays this year scrambling and out of structure and getting downfield. I kind of just completely disagree with your point about him past 10 yards in the air. Like, maybe the advanced numbers say that, but he's hit on a lot of stuff downfield. And I think he's really accurate. Outside of just ability, too, I love Baker's leadership qualities. I love him as a leader of men, as a locker room presence. I mean, I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag, because this will probably be our biggest discrepancy on this show. I have Baker as a top 10 quarterback right now. I think Baker is one of the best players for Tampa Bay. I think he is the biggest. Maybe Mike Evans is the biggest reason this offense is great, because I think Mike Evans is one of the greatest wideouts, probably a top 20 to 25 wide receiver in NFL history with how consistent he's been. But I think Baker is, after Mike, I think he's the second best player on this offense, and he's
Worse?
I mean, worse is if we're skill position. Then we'll not because offensive line's hard to. Like I said, man, I've been fighting the Penei Sewell MVP case. Theo, come on. Man.
That's true. That's true. Logan has been pushing some crazy cases,
but I think Baker's legitimately great, and I would not hesitate to have him as my front man. Don't get me wrong. There's been some duds. There's been some stinkers. This recent game was disappointing. That's one of the worst games. And even then, I mean, Baker was making plays to keep them competitive. But the game against Detroit was disappointing. Even though they win that game, they couldn't move the ball a whole lot. I don't know, man. I really believe in Baker, and I think he's one of the 10 best QBs in football.
Wow.
I just can't get there at all. I think his pocket, just the way he looks and acts in the pocket gives nervousness, and when he gets like battered at all, I just have no idea what's going to happen next. And he's thrown a lot of picks because of it this year.
He's kind of done a lot of good stuff in those crazy moments. Like, I don't disagree that it's like manic, but also I think Baker as an athlete is underrated, and I think he's gotten better as an athlete, or at least has become more effective using his athleticism. Like, we've never seen him scramble like this. I don't think we've ever seen him this effective in terms of negating pressure. I mean, like, there's some crazy moments you think of, obviously, like the ridiculous stiff-arming Bosa for 5 seconds and then getting that throw off, but like, even the one in this lost them the game yesterday
game against Dallas,
somehow he's fighting off a sack for 4 seconds and keeps his forward progress, keeps his legs moving, and then gets that ball out to Rachaad White. Like, obviously, Baker makes mistakes. Baker is going to give you some turnovers. He's thrown 15 picks on the year. But also, he's leading out a top 5 offense. He's also got 34 touchdowns. He's towards the top of the league in passing yards. He's towards the top of the league in passer rating. And I do think has a really good arm. And I definitely think the situation around him has improved significantly offensively because the run game has gotten so much better. And I think the line in front of him is pretty good. But I also think that Logan made a really good point. Like, there were a couple games where he didn't have a healthy, established wide receiver, right? Evans was down, Godwin was down, and he was still slinging that shit. And I think is towards the top of the league in terms of explosive passes. I think like his average air yards per completion is low, but I do still think he's hit on some of those big chunk plays this season. And the Bucs offense has just been situationally across the board. I mean, they've been great on third down. They've been great in the red zone. And I think that Baker deserves a good amount of credit for that. Not all the credit, but like, I've been impressed because last year I thought he was doing the carry job where it's like they didn't have any run game and he was asked to shoulder so much of a load. This year it's a more balanced, more complete offense, but I've still been really impressed by him.
Maybe I'm blind. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But
I mean,
I just cannot get on board. Yeah.
I'm between you two, but I do think he's a top half quarterback. I don't think he's top 10, but I do think he's top half. I don't think he's a situation merchant. Like, I think the situation is good, but I think he's shown you even when the situation isn't good, he can produce in a way that some other guys around the league just haven't shown. So that is really interesting. Logan, who is in your 23 spot?
So I have Anthony Richardson here.
Okay.
I believe in the physical tools. I think Richardson's going to be a stud one day. And so like I said, this next stretch is kind of the younger, unproven crop guys I believe in the most. So, yeah, I've got Richardson at 23.
Wow. I do feel like Baker is still a tier above the names that are being thrown out in this range. But I'm interested, Theo, in who you have right above him. Who's your number 22?
I have Bryce Young.
Wow, you think Bryce is better than Baker?
He's charmed me. Oh,
you have gotten just caught up in that whimsy.
It's that smile,
that
man.
Woodland creature Disney whimsy that he's got. Wow.
But yeah, I Bryce was so good against the Cardinals yesterday that he just charmed me. Maybe this is too high because he was just so bad the first 16
Mm-hmm.
starts of his career in a way that it's almost tough to come back from. But he seems to be doing the thing. Like he was the first overall pick for a reason. And recently he's just been so good against the blitz, so good under pressure. The things that just absolutely sunk him
Mm-hmm.
early in his career, it has completely flipped in a way that is rare. I mean, it's the kind of improvement that we talk about from like a Josh Allen back when he like started to turn it around. People say like, "Oh, you just never see improvement like this." I don't know if I've seen improvement like this, like what I'm seeing from Bryce Young. Like he's hitting the top of his drop. There's like a wall of people coming at him, and it doesn't matter that he's short. He's able to like fade away, and he's put some of these like out-breaking throws under pressure just on the money, like week after week after week recently. And I think he's impressed me. He's got some out of structure wiggle to him, a lot of wiggle
Mm-hmm.
to him. Yeah, it should have beaten the Eagles, but Leggett dropped the ball. Uh, Against the Cowboys, he took a ton of sacks. He took just a lot of negative plays in general. So I might be jumping the gun here, but I have been moved by some of these Bryce Young performances. I I I think he's got a chance to actually kind of end up hitting a little bit, but he's
Mm-hmm.
still in the 20s for a reason. That is, it would be a bit unprecedented.
Yeah, I like what we've seen from Bryce recently. I do, but I do think part of it is sort of viewed from the prism of like, this dude is like the most improved. It actually reminds me to some extent of the discourse that we had about Bo. I think that Bryce has done more impressive stuff, but I think when you come from such a low point and then you look that much better, I think it's all the more exciting and people want to give you maybe extra credit for that. I struggle to see the case for Bryce being better than Baker Mayfield. I do. I get what you're saying about poise under pressure. I just think there is a different level of ability to create still that we have seen from Baker. Like, I would need to see Bryce doing more out of structure still. I do think there's a completely different level of arm talent. That's a bit of a tough case for me to see. But obviously, Bryce doesn't have good weapons. I just still worry about the ceiling for him with the physical tools, unless he really starts weaponizing his quickness more.
Yeah, that's the thing that kind of gets me excited about him is I think there is a lot more quickness and decisiveness
Mm-hmm.
to his game. I mean, Baker in this scheme with this offensive line, he's not under pressure hardly at all this season. I think he still struggles to be, kind of on time and play in rhythm. That's my biggest issue with him is he just isn't really. I don't know, like Liam Cohen makes him get the ball out sometimes, I think, and that helps him. But when there's actually an opportunity to like drop back and play in rhythm, and we really see like the type of quarterback that Baker is, I think he really struggles with a lot of the things that Bryce also struggles with. I've got them in the same tier right now. I'd feel about as good as about the same with both of them. With Baker, it's like, how would he do outside of Liam Cohen's system? With Bryce, it's, well, can he keep it up? I think both of those questions are just about as existential to me.
It's a vintage NFC South mid-off.
Oh
However,
yeah.
I think the answer is pretty clear, in my opinion. So my number 22 is Aaron Rodgers. I think that we kind of already touched on this, but he obviously has his limitations at this point. The arm isn't as live as it once was. He's obviously not nearly the creator out of structure and the mover that he once was. And he has been disappointingly inaccurate to me, but I still think he's a good processor of the game. I still think that he's got a solid arm. He's been inconsistent. Like a lot of the guys in this range, he's had some high highs. I mean, he's had some games where he's really putting it all together and is just in total control. And then he's had some games where he just can't move the football down the field. And I just think there's been too many of the latter for me to have him higher than this. Like, obviously, the offensive situation is not good because of the offensive line, because of the run game. But the passing attack, the weapons that he has at his disposal, he's got one of the best receiving duos in football, and I just don't think he's made the most of that. Like, for them to still be 23rd in net yards per pass attempt, for them to be as anemic of an offense as they've been in totality, I do think that speaks to the level that Rodgers is playing at. It's just a very mediocre level, and there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And so I would definitely have Rodgers clear of all the dudes below him. Like Carr is the guy one spot below him. I definitely prefer Rodgers. But out of this next sort of tier of really solid quarterbacks, I think he's at the bottom for me.
And the biggest thing, I mean, the biggest reason for me is just the lack of mobility now. Is like anytime the pocket collapses and they send a blitz, it's like Rodgers is helpless. Like the Minnesota game was really ugly. There's some ugly stuff on tape from this last game. Like he just can't move anymore. And when the play is open early and he can get the ball out quick to Adams or Garrett, he can make that play, but it's got to be quick. It's got to be on time. There's really nothing I think that Rodgers can do out of structure right now.
Timing, too, I think is a good point. Like, I feel like his timing with Devontae has not been as money as you would think with how much football they've played together. I think it's gotten better, but on totality this year, I think that's been kind of a surprising issue to some extent.
So my number 22, I think you guys have both already had him on the list. I've got Caleb Williams here.
Okay.
He's one of the better guys out of the young QB bunch. And again, I'm striking a balance here between how much I want them for a game today and how much I want them long term. But I think Caleb's the best out of that bunch. That being said, if he was starting a game for me tomorrow, I would be a little bit concerned about the accuracy, and that's what keeps him from getting higher. Just because, I think we were all kind of anticipating a record-setting, record-breaking, quarterback debut, rookie season from him, and it's been Jaden. Jaden's been that guy. It hasn't been Caleb, so he's down here for me.
Who's at 21 for you, Theo? Who's one spot above Bryce?
Tua. I got
okay.
Tua.
Let's hear about it.
Tua's game, like I could be convinced to move him down and not up. He's another one that I just do not respect the way that he approaches the quarterback position. If I was a coach, it's the complete opposite of what I'd value. Obviously, there are many that feel differently. There are many with schemes that might, fit Tua's skill set perfectly, but I just want someone who can hold the ball. Really, I want someone who can hold the ball and make plays better than he can. He can throw a mean dig. He can do some crazy impressive things ball handling. I mean, people freak out when like Mahomes does a no-look like shovel to Kelsey or whatever. Like the best at that is actually Tua. Like he's hit some just crazy stuff like real short, but you start to stretch the field and it starts to fall apart. You try to get him to, manipulate a defender with his eyes. He kind of does it. Like he'll look someone off in the flat and then immediately throw the dig. But it's like I almost wonder how much he's really processing how often he throws that dig of all the time, or if coach just says like, look off into the flat and then throw over the middle, it'll be there. Because sometimes it'll just go right to somebody standing there that he just didn't see. So I'm like, how much reading are you really doing? Or are you just like, going through the motions that coach told you to go through? That's what's opening some things up, and the speed of the playmakers is opening some things up, and then things just happen to be there. Like, how much are you doing yourself? I don't think it's much, because routinely this guy throws the worst picks you'll ever see in your life. I've been doing the interception reviews on TikTok for like 3 years now. Tua always throws the worst ones, the ones where it's like, oh, it's right to the guy. Oh, it's so clear there's a lack of arm strength here. He's got a real turnover problem. He's got a big game problem. He's got a concussion problem. There's just a lot that would prevent me from wanting to build around him to the point where he could even be lower than number 20-something, 22, wherever I've got him.
I agree with a lot of what you laid out. I have Tua just a few spots higher. I have him at number 19. All the limitations, I think, are undeniable at this point, right? I mean, obviously the arm talent is very low end for an NFL starter. Obviously the mobility is very low end for an NFL starter. Just the ability to create out of structure in totality, hugely limiting. How he's fared against elite defenses, how he's fared against just good teams, period. Turnovers have been such a massive problem. How he's fared in bad weather. Like, all of these things are big old limitations for Tua. Big old limitations that to me have always made the conversation some people want to put him in silly. The reason that maybe I give him just a little bit more grace than you, Theo, is I do think he's so good at that in-structure stuff. I do think his timing is that good. I do think his accuracy is really good. I still have him as a guy who is below the equator in terms of NFL starters, but I think he's pretty close to that. And I think for a regular season quarterback, he's good. right? I mean, we've seen him lead out really good offenses, great situations, of course, great play calling, great weapons around him, but we've seen him do that. But when it comes to a playoff game, yeah, honestly, like the guy who I have one spot below him, I might prefer specifically in that context because I just think Tua has so many massive red flags in those sort of games, and we've seen it over and over and over again. And in fact, we've never really seen him play well in those situations. Like, it's just reruns, man. It's just Hollywood sequel over and over again of Tua letting you down in the same way.
Yeah, I've actually got Tua at my 21 spot too, and I agree a lot with what you said, Theo. The only thing I would add is I think that the thing I mentioned about Rodgers kind of also applies to Tua too. When you can disrupt that timing and that rhythm, and he has to do stuff out of structure, he's really limited. Also, what you were talking about with quarterbacks that can hold the ball, you have to gimmick your offense around a guy like Tua. And I'm not saying that's an inherently like bad thing. Like I think coaches should tailor their scheme and game plan around the players and not vice versa, try to pigeonhole them into a system. But it's like the way Tua plays, it's so easy to disrupt, in my opinion, when you get into these big games and these cold weather situations. And I know the numbers, right? Because everybody last year, Tua led the league in yards. He had all these TDs and no interceptions. What did he do in big games? What did he do against great competition? What did he do out of structure? I still think he's really limited. And what you mentioned too, Carson, I would hear an argument too lower if it was just a playoff game or something like that. Like, hell, I might take Caleb Williams. I might take Derek Carr over Tua for a playoff game or something like that, man.
Oh, my.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
I got to say, you guys have me rethinking who I have at number 21. Because when I really try to think about this in a vacuum, I'm trying to think about who would scare me more. Because, in fact, both these quarterbacks actually play in the AFC East in my Buffalo Bills division. And we've seen both
You're
of
thinking
them.
May versus Tua?
I'm thinking May versus Tua.
Wow, really?
Thing
May's clear to me, bro. I'm already done. That's not even a question.
I'm taking May.
I'm conflicted. I think that
but
ceiling
can I ask
is
you
the
a question,
roof for
Carson?
Drake May. I think he's going to be an elite quarterback. Ask away.
Do you have any concerns about him? Because I'm just so enamored.
Concerns about him. I have zero concerns. I think he's going to be an elite quarterback. I think you could stamp it right now. And there's not a worse offensive situation in football, obviously. He has probably the worst offensive line and probably the worst group of weapons. Like,
you're not a big Jalen Polk and Vidarian Lowe and Pop Douglas
Pop
guy?
Douglas, Logan. Pop Douglas is the next big thing. I got Pats fans in my ear. Really, just one Pats fan.
Baker.
Yeah, Keyshawn Boutte didn't even get a mention. He's been like their number one receiver kind of as of late. Of course, Hunter Henry, just a monster for them.
Austin Hooper.
It's a terrible situation. It is an insanely bad situation, and he's still giving you almost 7 yards per pass attempt. He's got 14 touchdowns, 10 picks. He's giving you solid production through the air. He's got almost 400 rushing yards, over 8 yards per attempt. He's been one of the most effective scrambling quarterbacks in football. He's got a hell of an arm. I think he processes the game at a pretty high level, and he can do that stuff out of structure. Like, I think he tries some things that he probably shouldn't at this point, and I think that's where some of the turnover stuff comes into play. I thought that he had a pretty bad pick in the red zone against the Bills, and then he also led to a defensive touchdown, but that was really just he was throwing a screen backwards pass and it got blown up. That wasn't so much on him. Like, I'm just thinking Tua is more dependable, but Drake is really, really good.
In a big game,
and if
he's
you
not.
put Drake in that situation, man, if you put Drake in Miami,
put Tua
if you gave
on the
Drake
Patriots,
Mike
how many
McDaniel,
games did they win?
It's not a bad point at all, dude. I might flip on this.
Do it.
I don't know. Sell me, fellas. Convert.
I don't know. Can you name one good Tua big game? Like, really?
Like actual big game?
Yeah.
No.
The one thing that blew my mind on the broadcast yesterday was they said that, well, you know that stat, I saw you tweeted that out initially, Theo, I think about after Drake was 3 games through, he had like the most yards per rushing attempt of, I think at the time it was the most rushing yards per attempt of any player in NFL history, but he has no designed runs this year. And that's what I would point to, is the Pats don't like draw up.
He does now. He had a couple in the Bills game. Those were actually his first.
From the last game, yeah. But, like, that's ridiculous. Like, that is Drake calling his own number every time before this game. I will say, Drake has maybe the funniest pick on the year next to Will Levis, that one in the Bears game where he's rolling out and just never sees TJ Edwards. He throws it, like, right to him in that game. That would be my argument to you, Carson, is if you put Tua on New England and you have Gerard Mayo as your coach and Alex Van Pelt and that offensive line and that receiving talent, like Tua might win, 2 games? He's playing in the cold all year long. I mean, and you give Drake May, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle, the Dolphins might be a playoff team, dude.
All right, you cooked. I'm moved. I mean, I think this is just a spot where you have to do your best possible to separate the guys from the situation, and I feel like I probably didn't even do that enough because I do think that Drake is that good. I think that he has every trait that I look for in an awesome quarterback, and Tua is basically lacking all the traits that I really, really want. As you said, Theo, like when it comes to these sort of big games where I just need my quarterback to make plays. But it's tough because Tua has had a pretty darn good stretch of this regular season as of late. I thought that he played really well against the Bills, and obviously they've won 5 of their last
so
7.
He can throw a check down to A-Chain. Drake May can do that.
All right. I'm going Tua all the way down to 21, actually. I'm going to backpack
Let's go.
what you guys are saying, and I'm going to put Drake May at 20. I've been convinced.
I like that. I think that's a good call.
Okay, so let's see. Logan, who's in your 21 spot?
Probably the inverse. I have Tua at 21.
Okay,
so
right.
in my 20 spot, I have Brock Purdy here. And honestly, it's a lot of the same thought exercise we just did with Tua. And actually, I think the hammer in the nail in the coffin for Tua for me would be in a playoff game. It's I just don't want Tua in a playoff game, period. And the difference between Tua and Brock, why I prefer Brock to Tua, both of these guys are in great offensive situations, brilliant offensive minds, offenses that when they're healthy can normally run the football with good skill position talent. Brock has a little more of that self-creation edge, but guys, think about if you had asked this a year or two ago. You may have had casual football fans putting Brock Purdy in the top 10 or maybe even the top 5 with how they were playing.
Go higher than top 10, buddy.
Yeah. He was, 3rd in MVP voting last year or something ridiculous like that?
I think he was 4th. I think it was Lamar, Dak, CMC, Brock Purdy, then Josh Allen.
It was ridiculous. But I think you really see Brock's limitations in 2 situations. Bad weather games. The game against Buffalo this year was a disaster. I know all of it wasn't on him. His team also couldn't hold on to the football. But the Baltimore game as well, right? Brock in bad weather scares the bejesus out of me. And when he's playing from behind, I know we saw them come from behind in the Detroit game and the NFC title game, but I don't like Brock in either of those situations. And it's that's when you need your quarterback more than anything else. And on top of that, sure, he's got a little self-creation. He doesn't have the livest arm. I think that Brock can be inaccurate. I think Brock can be turnover-prone because that's the attribution, right? Me and you talked about that all last year, Carson, with guys like Tua, Brock, Jimmy G. Anytime there's a winning QB, they always get this guy's great at protecting the football mantra. Mm-hmm. He's efficient. And it's well, actually, when you really look into it, he's not. And so Brock's just in that he's better than Tua because of the self-creation edge, but he's still a liability in my opinion. And so and he doesn't have a crazy live arm. So Brock is firmly in the Tua tier to me, and he's at number 20.
Theo, who do you have at 20? Or are you at 21?
I think I also have Brock.
Okay.
And I think he does some things that are cool. He's really twitchy and he's quick and he can get the ball out and he's, good at layering these throws in, which I think is the most impressive throw you can hit sometimes is some of these layered digs. But at the same time, it's the only throw he's really been trained to hit for a lot of the production that he's had. And I think the production that he's had is why people argue him as high as they have and why he gets all the MVP votes that he does. But if you look at the most efficient quarterbacks of the 20th century or the 21st century, whatever century we're in, Brock is number 1 and then Jimmy G is number 2.
Yeah.
I don't think that Jimmy G is like that either, and he was worse than Brock was. And he went to the Super Bowl too and lost to the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. And he was, the EPA darling too. And I just think it has to do with playing with Kyle Shanahan and getting to throw to Debo and Ayuk and McCaffrey and Kittle and having Trent Williams out there. And it's just an all-star cast. And Brock hasn't done enough for me to prove himself when those guys are out. Last year against the Browns, he faced some injuries. They went on a bit of a losing streak. This year, their guys are hurt. He's playing himself out of a big contract, like legitimately. His arm talent is really poor to me. We saw that in the game against the Rams on Thursday a few nights ago. Every deep shot was just atrocious, like underthrown, not really giving his guy a chance. He scrambles a lot, but he scrambles to run. He's not really like you think about like Josh Allen, man. Like, and I know he's the absolute tip top of athleticism like ever. But that guy like fades towards the sideline and he gets like closer to running out of bounds. He can still uncork it 50 yards downfield.
Yeah.
Jordan Love can do things like that. Who else? Kyler can do things like that. There are guys with real honest-to-God arm talent. Brock is just not one of those guys. He breaks structure all the time, but he's not going to be like getting closer to the sideline like, oh, man, he's really about to launch it. His average yards per throw outside of the pocket is like 4 yards. It's really low. He's the best from the pocket, and I think that's because he has all these yak monsters to throw to over the course of his career, and I think Shanahan's a really good offensive mind. I think Brock himself, I mean, he's like, I don't know, who's like a role player on the Celtics? Like if we'd stack up,
he's
Sam Peyton Pritchard.
He's Sam Hauser. Is he Peyton Pritchard?
I think he's Sam
Peyton
Hauser.
Pritchard. Got a little bit of juice.
He's got a little bit of.
Peyton
he's
Pritchard's
not. I mean,
been
he's
like
not
maybe the
terrible
best
by
shooter.
any
He's been
means.
maybe the best shooter in basketball this year, though.
Peyton Pritchard's been nasty.
Is Peyton Pritchard been the best shooter in basketball? That's a perfect comp then. Look, you've got
Steph Curry's
got
been the best shooter in basketball. Let's be real.
Whatever the
and then
efficiency
AJ
numbers
Green.
say.
But yes, Peyton Pritchard has been very efficient.
Okay, so he's Peyton Pritchard on the Celtics. You got all these monsters that draw all this attention. It creates really easy looks for him to like look like the most accurate guy ever when he's not. And it's just he's that kind of guy on the course of a football team instead of a basketball team. It's just that he plays quarterback, so he will infinitely get, more credit than, a role player for the Celtics does for their wins.
I have Brock at number 18. I mean, I think that we're basically aligned on this. I think this year has very much vindicated those of us, and we all fall into this group, who last year, right, had to be fighting hard on the battle of Tua's not elite, Purdy is an elite, because their efficiency numbers were astronomical, but also their offensive situations were incredible because of play calling, because of the skill position talent that they had. Like, it's just a great infrastructure to succeed in, and it can make an average quarterback look elite. Like, you hit the nail on the head with the Jimmy G point, Theo. Like, if you look at all of the efficiency numbers, they would tell you that Jimmy G is one of the best quarterbacks of this century. And it always blew my mind that Niners fans' conclusions after that, after seeing them produce these elite offenses with Jimmy G, who I think was definitely worse than Purdy. Then Purdy is putting up like slightly better numbers, but you just had a not good quarterback who was putting up elite efficiency numbers and leading an elite team offense, quote unquote leading. And your conclusion when Purdy is doing it is not, oh, we just got a slightly better quarterback who's thriving because our system is so awesome. It's, we got the next Tom Brady. We got the greatest quarterback talent to ever live. Like, that never made sense to me. It still doesn't make sense to me. He never belonged in MVP conversations. He's solid. I think that he belongs above Tua because he can do more out of structure. He can do more with his legs. I think his arm is a little bit more dynamic, and he's not quite as good at some of that like timing and in structure stuff as Tua is. And I think he maybe has been a little bit worse in those areas compared to the level he was at last year. I just think Brock is solid, man. I think he's unremarkable. I think his athletic tools are unremarkable, but better than Tua's. So I have him down here. I had Drake at number 20. Logan, who do you have at number 20?
I've got Brock at 20. I'm into 19. I think we all are. I'm trying to figure out who you have at 19, Carson.
You might not
Trevor,
like who I have at 19.
I've got Trevor Lawrence in this spot, and T-Law's hard to rank because I think he still checks all your boxes of like superstar quarterback traits. Like, he's still got the cannon arm. He's still got some mobility out of the pocket. And that's why he's completely clear of Brock or Tua conversations. I get it, guys. They win games. Trevor Lawrence doesn't. He plays for the freaking Jaguars, man. I mean, it is as poverty franchise as it gets, dude. It's Cincy, it's Carolina, and it's Jacksonville, man. I mean, scraping the bottom of the barrel.
You put Cincy in there, and you didn't.
Cincy
put
is a
Cleveland in there.
poverty franchise since the day they were invented. Dude, they had them boys practicing outside. They didn't even have a practice facility. And you hear all the end of the year reports. The Bengals have Fs across the board. They should, I've said this before. They should change their name to the Cincinnati Burrows, because once Joe Burrow is gone, that franchise is done. So I don't really hold the overall losses against Trevor against him, but I will say this year was really alarming in terms of his performance. Specifically, that Browns game. The Browns suck. They put up 18 points against the Jags. They're the worst offense in football, and yet and I get the Browns' defense was good and has been playing all right. Trevor's was really inaccurate, and that's the biggest concerning thing to me, is because you'll see other things and it'll be inconsistent, but he's been consistently off target and inaccurate for a while, and that concerns me. But I still buy into the physical traits. I still think Trevor eventually is going to be an above-average quarterback in this league. I would have paid him the big contract. I know that was controversial. I still believe in Trevor, and I think I lean on the side of he's going to figure it out. I hope they overhaul this coaching staff. They let Doug Peterson and everybody else go, and they completely retool. It sucks doing that to a young quarterback, but I think it's the route. It's looking up, though. I really like Brian Thomas. I like the connection he has with Evan Ingram. There's something that I think could be there in Jacksonville. Maybe not next year, but over the next 5 years, I hope they figure it out. And again, I still buy into Trevor because of those physical tools that other guys just simply don't have.
Theo, who do you have at 19?
I've got Russ. Danger Russ. He's been a pleasant surprise this year. I think that he's done a good job kind of accounting for his age in a way that hasn't always been the case, like late in Seattle and even in Denver. He's getting rid of the ball a lot faster than he was before, especially on deep balls. Like his average 20-plus air yard throw came after 3.5 seconds in Denver. I mean, that's longer than it was during his Seattle days when he was like running around. In Pittsburgh, it's like at a nice 2.8 seconds last I checked. Like hit the top of your drop, get it out to Pickens. It's been accurate. If that's not there, hit the check down to Najee or Freiermuth or something like that. There's very little intermediate in his game, but that's okay if he's hitting the big stuff at a high rate. This most recent week against the Ravens, he fell back into some old habits. I think things had been going a little bit too well for him, and he's like, I still got it, man. Like you could almost see it in his head, like as he was running towards the end zone and decided to cut back. He was like, I'm the old Russ. We're playing for the division, like clinch the playoffs. Like I'm that guy again. And he tries to like make somebody miss and he fumbles, and like just kind of in general the game got away from him a little bit. He needs to play within himself again. But I've liked him when he's been doing that, but he is still limited. I wish there was more intermediate stuff with him. But he's been a pleasant surprise. I've enjoyed watching him this year for the most part. And even when he was bad, I was still laughing. So
So you had fun. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
I did have fun. And it was no Pickens, so I can maybe give him a bit of a pass. But
I have Russ at number 19 too. And I think that he's done a good job here. I mean, I think that the Steelers offense has overachieved expectations with him at the helm. And like when you are down Pickens, it's a really tough spot. And he's done a pretty solid job of avoiding mistakes. He's been pretty efficient. I have T-Law higher than him. I actually have T-Law up at number 17. And I think that does just come down to T-Law does still have a different level of ability at this stage compared to Russ, in my opinion. The accuracy stuff with T-Law was really bad to start this year, but it did get better. And I just think he's one of those guys who the box score is very unkind to and a little bit dishonest with because the situation has been so bad in terms of play calling. And I think the receiving talent has gotten better, but he didn't get to play with Brian Thomas Jr. all that much. And like we know how much drops have plagued the Jags historically. I still think when you look at a lot of those traits, like, do I think he's at the level that I expected him to be at or that I thought he'd be at as a prospect or after his second season? No, he hasn't been consistently that guy, but like still his ability to stand in the pocket, his pocket presence, his size, his athleticism, his ability to move, his arm talent, like there's a lot of good there. So I don't think the results justify him being higher, like being an upper echelon fringe top 10 sort of quarterback like I think he would have been a year or two ago if we had these conversations, but I still do like him more than a Russ.
I completely understand that. The one thing with Russ, I mean, Russ has been so good at playing safe football, and that is what I like about Russ. Avoiding sacks for the most part, throwing the ball away, limiting turnovers. That's what's been great about Russ. And the one thing that I think has elevated him on this list is his deep ball. I think Russ, though, is one of
Yeah.
the best deep balls in football. Like, he has been deadly accurate. And not just to George, too. I mean, you've seen some plays to Calvin Austin,
yeah.
to Mike Williams. Like, he's had some moments with other guys. Last week was that was something, man. Yeah. Dude, you talk about him licking his chops. Yeah, man, I could see it. Like, Russ thought he was going to have that classic Pittsburgh Steelers moment. This is going to be everywhere on social. Like, he got a little bit too greedy there, but for the most part, I trust Russell Wilson, and I've been really impressed with him this year. I thought he was washed in Denver. I thought he was completely cooked. And it is just because wholeheartedly, I would rather have Trevor Lawrence for the future, but for a game, I think Russ, is just a little bit safer right now. The one thing I think the Steelers need to do, and I didn't say this yesterday, I think Russ runs a hurry-up offense really well, and I wish the Steelers, and a lot of quarterbacks too, I wish would just get into quicker drives and quicker paces. Russ runs a really good 2-minute drill still at this point in his career, and I think when the offense is sputtering with or without George Pickens, I wish they'd implement, even back to Big Ben, the offense ran better. I think with these veteran quarterbacks that get it, I wish they'd run a little bit more tempo. I think if the Steelers' offense is sputtering, that would help them out a little bit.
Okay,
but
so
he's
Logan.
He's at number he's
18?
one spot ahead of T-Law for me. He's at 18.
Okay, Theo, who's your number 18?
My number 18, let's see. It was I think it's May here.
Drake May here. Okay.
And
feel
that
we've
might be too
discussed
high.
Well,
But
what do you want to add about him?
I guess, yeah, we've talked about him. I like a lot about him. I loved him as a prospect, and I think he's shown through on it. I think, like, he's very Darnold-y, like, at worst, I think. Like, maybe he's not Josh Allen. Maybe he will never be that good, but, like, there is an aggressiveness to him, a traitsiness to him, where it's like he'll always, I mean, I guess this wasn't always the case with Darnold, but I mean, Drake's already gone through his rookie year better than Darnold did, but there's going to be a lot of juice with him throwing past the sticks, scrambling. Like, there's going to be explosive plays to counteract the negative dumb ones that he has. It just, where will that ratio end up settling is the only question.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident in the ratio, though, man. I think he's a big play machine.
I think so, too.
I think he's got all the traits. I absolutely love Drake May. I thought some of the pre-draft discourse around him was crazy. I know you were high on him, Theo. I was high on him. He was my QB, too. He's been awesome this year. I mean, he's certainly been better than Caleb, who was QB1. So I have Brock at 18. I have T-Law at 17, as I already said. Logan, who do you have at 17?
This guy's making our debut on the list. I think he's probably going to be higher for you guys.
Whoa, you're going to have Drake May way up there, you sly son of a bitch.
I only have Drake May at 16, and it is that veteran presence. And just because we saw some of the bad this year, if we had done this list a year ago, this guy would be a shoo-in for top 10. I have Dak Prescott, and it's just because this season we just saw some of the negative, and maybe I'm skewed from the Steelers game, but Jesus Christ, man. Dak was giving out Christmas gifts back then, dude. I still think Dak has that bozo gene. And that's why Dak's down here for me. Drake may have, I don't think Drake has and like you can point to maybe Goff or Darnold and say maybe they have that bozo gene and you're waiting for it to creep out. Look, man. Dak he has more of those.
He thought on that one. He thought on that one, and then he dodged it. And he said, I'm not going to address that.
I don't think Baker does. Dak does.
Baker has the bozo gene. Of course he has the bozo gene. But he's also got the quirked-up white boy
Baker's
swag.
got the playmaker gene. Dak's bozo gene seems to rear its ugly head more than I'd like. And last year he was really good at limiting it. But this year, I don't know. Maybe it's the star on the side of his helmet. In clutch games,
just get mad.
In clutch games, in big moments, Dak's going to poop his pants. I know it's coming. He's going to lay a stinker. There's this sort of impending, my heart is sinking, and not in a good way. Not in like a Lamar Josh, oh shit, this dude's going to hit a big play. With Dak, it's, my heart is sinking, he's going to throw an interception. I can't shake that feeling with Dak, and that's basically my justification for him being this low, because he's got the veteran presence. He was an MVP candidate last year. I get it. I just feel like he's going to crumble. That's why Dak's at 17.
He has had way too many just bizarre picks in the playoffs, and in the Packers game last year, it was definitely tough to defend him after that, especially just going into how poorly he played. But I still really like the aggressiveness with him. I think he's as good as we've got as like a pocket passer, at least in the regular season. I mean, he's a true kind of throwback quarterback. People always yearn for the days. It's like, oh, I remember when Peyton would have 5,000 yards and Breeze would have 5,000 yards and Rodgers would have 4,000 and Flacco would have 4,000. Like, he's kind of that era where it's just spread, no motion, just we're going to line up and we're going to go through a full progression and win from the pocket like that. I think he's as good as anybody playing like that, at least in the regular season. So I've got him pretty high. But yeah, the playoff success needs to come. But the thing with Dak that I always am holding out hope for is like he might, because of this style, like he might play for another 10 years. I still think like he can kind of buck this playoff monkey off his back at some point. Well, let's hope, because it has not happened yet.
Look, man, I don't know how I've found myself as a Dak defender, but I think I am a Dak defender. I have Dak a good bit higher than this. I think that you laid it out there, Theo. I mean, I still think he's an elite pocket passer, and I actually think on average he's a pretty elite processor of the game. Now, this year, he had some bad picks. Like, there's just no two ways about that. I also think, though, he felt an insane amount of pressure in this offense, considering that the run game was a 0.
And the boundary receivers are 0 too. Like, it's just CD, and he would get bracketed. So it's like, do you force it to CD or do you force it to someone who sucks? Like,
and he was expected to put up 40 points in every game because the defense was decimated when he was healthy, right? No Micah, no Deron Bland. They were down all these key guys. It was just a terrible, terrible situation, and I'm not going to judge him entirely by him in the worst situation that he's had in his career, because I also think, like, you look at what he did last year, man. The Cowboys were the number one offense in football, and they were the number one offense in football with CD as the only standout receiving weapon, with a run game that was entirely unimpressive, with an offensive line that was just solid. Like, that was Dak carrying you from the pocket. I just thought his control of the game last season was so masterful, and you see that, right, with the 36 touchdowns, the 9 picks, and over 4,500 yards, and he really was, with CD, carrying that offense. So I get the playoff stuff. What's difficult for me with Dak is that I struggle to see the cause of the playoff stuff in the same way that I do with the Tua, where it's like, oh, he just has these core limitations in terms of arm talent, mobility, creation out of structure. Like, Dak has the aggression. Dak has shown the decision-making.
It's the bozo gene.
I think part of it is sample size. I think part of it is just we got to get him back there.
He's a Cowboys
we got to give him a couple
man.
more shots at it. Well, he's a Cowboys quarterback. That's why you hate him. Me, personally, I'm unbiased.
I don't hate Dak. I root for him, man. I think he's a good guy.
Oh, you don't root for him. You want to see him burn with the rest of the Cowboys.
Oh, don't get... Oh, I thoroughly enjoy a Cowboys loss, for sure.
Yeah. Who's your least favorite Cowboy of all time?
Troy Aikman, gotta be, right? I don't know. He's mine. Overrated.
How? You
Doesn't matter. Didn't have to be alive.
Maybe... Probably Tony Romo.
I kind of like Romo.
I like Romo as a commentator, but when he played, I just thought he was so overrated. Ironically, now that I've grown and matured in my football, I think he's kind of underrated now.
I'll say one more thing about Dak real quick. The one concern that I do have about him, beyond the playoff stuff, which we can't write off. I mean, I think if we were just looking at regular season resume, he'd be higher than this. But I have him down at 10. I'll just say that outright. The one thing that concerns me that we've seen this year beyond the picks, because, I don't know, that's concerning, but again, the situation's a factor. I do think his mobility has continued to get worse, and now he has another hamstring injury that, like, shouldn't really be a long-term thing, but maybe it is something that just continues to wear on him. Like, I just think he hasn't been a scrambler for a long time, but he's less of a threat as a mover. He's a less effective mover than he's ever been before. So that's the one sort of long-term thing that I would consider a knock on Dak, but I'm still a good bit higher on him than this. Okay, Theo, who's next for you?
Let's see. I think I got Rodgers next.
Okay.
I'm a bit higher on Rodgers. I think that he's got a lot of things that hold him back that are just like personality things more than like on-field things. Like, I think he insisted on bringing in like Hackett and like a bunch of like bad receivers that kind of hamstrung the team. And I think a lot of the problems with the offense come from the OC and just like the style of play he wants to do. But I think like the ability within his body is still kind of there. Like the mobility isn't. Like he's not going to be weaving through the whole defense and like getting hit and throwing and scoring touchdowns like he was with the Packers. But I still like his arm. I think that his accuracy is still pretty high level. Like he's hit some total dots this year up the seam. But the consistency from, I mean, it can be the same concept. I've seen it like within the same game, like the exact same thing happens. And like one time he hits it and then the next time he just turns it down and there's just no explicable reason for it. So I don't know what that's about. I don't know why he isn't on the same page with Garrett Wilson who's like always open, and they just couldn't connect early in the year. And it's like, why? Is it because you were in Egypt? Like, I think that might be why. Like he just isn't there during the time to work these kinks out. And then like he doesn't talk to Wilson on the sideline. Like I remember hearing the sideline reporter saying like Tyrod Taylor went over and talked to him. It's like, bro, why isn't Rod? You're the one who needs to work things out. But I do still think that there's a good thrower of the football in there. He's one of the better players against man coverage this year, actually. He still kind of has that fade in his bag. If he sees cover one, he'll go to Devontae. He'll go to Wilson. He'll drop some dimes. He's, like I said, throwing some dimes up the seam. So, like, I have a very complicated relationship on how I feel about Rodgers in all aspects of him. And it's still complicated now because I'm like, he's not like 100% like totally done to the level of like Kirk Cousins. But at the same time, he's also not good, and he does a lot of like off the field stuff, I feel like, that makes his situation worse. And I don't quite know how to weigh that.
The reason I was so okay with leaving him as low as I did is I just don't think Rodgers has that burning desire to really win anymore. And I get that gets beaten out of you as the season goes along because
he's got the desire to burn ayahuasca. Am I right?
Damn right. Damn right. That was like you said, dude, if you really wanted it, like I feel like you'd be at training camp early, you'd be at rookie mini camp working with these guys, you would be doing these things that you'd be taking on that leadership role. We're like, dude, you're one of the 3 greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, man. Like, in my opinion, I think I just feel like I wish he had taken that responsibility and owned it. And I feel like he wants to avoid that and wants nothing to do with that. Is a big part of playing the quarterback position. And I don't know if he's ever. Was he like this? Did you think he was like this in Green Bay?
Definitely. I mean, he there was a time where he wasn't very good in Green Bay. I mean, there was a time. I mean, they drafted Jordan Love for a reason, and then he got pissed, and then the fire lit, and then he started to turn it on and was an MVP 2 straight years. And I thought getting traded could relight that fire, like, but it didn't. And I know, like, he clearly hates ownership there, and it's probably valid. And maybe he just doesn't want to play for Woody Johnson and just is like, whatever, dude, I'm going to chill somewhere else and I'm going to make all the decisions and I'm going to, not put my best foot forward because like you're an idiot and your Brick Johnson's son is like running the team or whatever. So maybe that has stuff to do with it. And he's just like almost trying to force his way out. Like I could see, and like trying to start again and really get a ride off into the sunset with the Vikings next year and completing his Favre arc. But who knows what goes on in that guy's head? I don't know. He's capable of playing better than he did this year on the Jets. I still believe that. It's just, maybe by the chance he gets to prove it, the arm actually does start to go more than it was this year. So who knows what we'll ever see from him again. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we can discount the possibility of a resurgence because I think that clearly he's had it in him to be a quality, like above average starting quarterback. Like that's what the highs have been, but the consistency really has been an issue. So I have him a little lower. It's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7.
So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Logan, you have Drake May at 16. I'll go ahead.
Correct.
I'll say my number 16. I have Jalen Hurts here. And I think that this is where we're in a very tight range of like 6 quarterbacks who I kind of debated in various orders. I'm not the highest on Hurts. I do think he has some limitations. I think he holds onto the ball for a really long time, the longest average time in the NFL, actually. I don't think he's a consistently great decision maker. I think that he's done a really nice job of cutting down on the turnovers as this year has gone along, but I don't know that I can consistently rely on him. If you're going to ask him to shoulder more of a load in this offense, like I still think there's the potential for some mistakes there. I don't think he has consistently great pocket presence. I think he misses out on some opportunities in the passing game that I would like to see him take. But there's a lot of stuff that he does well. He's efficient as a passer. He's been very efficient as a passer. He's been much better taking care of the football since the bye. And obviously, like, he's an awesome short yardage threat with his legs. He's an awesome red zone quarterback because of what he can do with his legs. It's just when I look at the guys above him, I don't think you could carry some of those other situations like those guys can do or are doing, mostly because all of them are better pure passers and probably have better feel for the game and just are probably more audacious through the air, right? They just do more to elevate a situation, whereas Jalen Hurts is in heaven. Like, is there a better offensive situation than having that offensive line,
not.
that run game, that receiving tandem? Like, it's unbelievable. And so that's where I think the production with him, the efficiency, maybe would make you think he belongs a little higher, but in terms of ability in a vacuum, this is where I feel comfortable with him at 16.
He's kind of got that Purdy thing where, like, he holds the ball for a long time, but he's not that good of a creator, at least throwing. Like, you don't think about Jalen Hurts, like, again, I'm going to use the classic Josh Allen. He's running towards the sideline. He throws it across his body because everybody chased him to the sideline. There's someone open up the middle, and he can hit it. Like, Hurts isn't really like that. As much as he scrambles, as much as he's more of like a power runner. I love him in the QB, like, draw game or QB power game. And scrambling to run, but not exactly scrambling to throw. He's not so great at that. And I think turnovers have been a problem with even in the Steelers game where like he came out and said like, "Is that what that's what you guys wanted to see, right?" Like even there, like he didn't protect the football. He took some really bad hits from T.J. Watt. It's a miracle he didn't fumble twice because of Watt. I don't know how he held on to that second one, but he kind of bailed out the back door and got hit. He does some things really well. We saw how much they missed him this last weekend when Kenny Pickett came in and they just loaded the box and blitzed Saquon Barkley and like no one could do anything about it. Well, I guess Devontae Smith could have caught a ball and they could have won.
True.
But, you know, Pickett made his fair share of mistakes and bad throws. So that Hurts probably would have hit. So he's a positive quarterback, but he's more limited than the top 10, certainly, I think.
Agreed.
He doesn't throw over the middle, really.
Do you have Hurts in your 16 spot, Theo? Or
I've got
him a little bit higher.
I have him one spot higher. I have him at 15. I have Jaden Daniels at number 16.
Okay.
Let's hear the case.
I mean, maybe people are thinking this is a little bit low because he's turned Washington around and he's, been such an efficient rookie. And I agree with all that. I'm just don't want to overrank him too much. I think about like Stroud last year and the rookie year that he had, and people were like, oh my God, he needs to be ranked in the top 3. He needs to be top 5. He's on the same level as like Joe Burrow right here, right now. He's better than Justin Herbert and Lamar. Like that's how people were talking about Stroud at the end of the year because he had a good rookie season. And then the second year, you're like, he's still really good, but the luster starts to fade. And I'm thinking about Jaden this year. And I'm thinking about like all the kind of phases of this season that he's had. Early, it was a lot of checkdowns, and the run game was absolutely cooking, and he was just kind of game managing his way through it and was super efficient, at a crazy high completion percentage. And it was pretty good, but he wasn't maybe, as elite as the numbers say. Then he kind of hurt his ribs and was kind of in a funk for a little bit. Recently, I think he's actually been playing some of his best ball, where the run game has kind of disappeared. Brian Robinson is fumbling on him. He's kind of got to take more of the load in the offense, and I think he's done a good job at that. But like, he did take 8 sacks in the Saints game. He did throw many bad picks in the Eagles game and tried to throw another one too. So now that we're seeing him shoulder more of the load, we're seeing a few more negative plays. We're seeing a real big dependence on him scrambling. I mean, he's an outlier how much he takes off and runs. So as good as he's been, and he's about the highest ranked rookie that I've got, I'm still not quite willing to put him in front of like a Super Bowl starting Jalen Hurts or a Dak or somebody like that. I think he's getting into that upper echelon of starter, but he's kind of, I'm comfortable just kind of saying that he's just breaking in there now, and it's kind of at the lower end of high-end starters.
Sure.
I understand that. I do have Jaden a little bit higher. I actually have Hurts in my 15 spot as well. So the way I think about it is just, I think that if, and again, it's not apples to apples, but I think if you put Jaden like in Philadelphia, he's in such a better offensive situation. And the Commanders' offense has been great with him. One of the best scrambling rookies of all time, so efficient, so good at protecting the football. And I agree with you. I think he's playing his best football right now, even though we got off to such a hot start. So I have him a little bit higher. In the Hurts thing, it's interesting because Hurts kind of had that Brock Purdy thing where you win a lot, you go to the Super Bowl. And I don't want to take anything away from Hurts that year, because that was a phenomenal year. That was a really good playoff run. He balled out in the Super Bowl. What an awesome game that was. But I think Hurts has come back a little bit down to earth for me from that. The one thing that I struggled with was trying to weigh Hurts' rushing value among other guys, because I think he does have more dual threat ability than some of the guys I have higher on the list, but I much prefer their arms and their processing and their control of the game in that regard, where I've just seen Hurts have really inaccurate games and make really, really bad decisions. And not that these other guys aren't prone to that. I just feel like Jalen Hurts is more prone to having games like that than some of the guys that are above him. So that's why Hurts is at 15 for me.
I want to return to the Jane Daniels conversation real quick. I have him a good bit higher than this. I have him at number 11, actually. And I do think that he's had a really phenomenal rookie season. I mean, a historic season in a number of ways, right? He's in rare company already in terms of total yardage. I think he's 7th total touchdowns. I want to say he's 5th. He's got 28. He's 3rd in rookie passer rating. He's 2nd all-time in rookie rushing yards. Like, the statistical case is pretty incredible. And I also think the impact on team offense has been so pronounced. I think the dual threat that he is just opens up so much for this running game, makes them so effective. I think he's been so great hitting shot plays, and I think that Cliff Kingsbury has definitely done a great job of creating a scheme that puts him in positions to succeed, and I think that Terry has been awesome. I think that the offensive situation is solid, but I think that Jaden is the biggest reason that they're a top 5 offense in football, and I just think he's actually gotten underrated. Like you mentioned, the people overrating CJ stuff last year, Theo. I don't think Jaden's gotten that treatment at all. Like maybe early in the year, people were getting really high on him, but now I agree with you. Like he just played undeniably his best game ever. I mean, I know he had like some of the ridiculously efficient performances early in the year, but what he just did against the Eagles defense, where he accounted for all but 29 of their yards and he had 5 touchdowns and he overcame 3 fumbles by his teammates, like that was an incredible performance. And I don't know, he's getting props for that, but like, I don't know if he's getting as much love as he should be. Like the fact that he and Bo Nix were in the same conversations, to me, was crazy. It's really, really rare. It's really special to see a rookie quarterback lead this sort of team offense that's been elite in like just about every way, right? I mean, the passing attack has been super efficient. The run game has been super efficient. They've been great on 3rd down, great on 4th down, great in the red zone. I think Jaden deserves a lot of credit for that. So are there guys who I trust more as pure passers, who have bigger arms, who I think are more polished from the pocket? Yes. That's why I have Jaden at number 11. But I think in terms of like just give me a guy who's an actual offensive engine, like Jaden is one of those dudes, and there's not a lot of those dudes in the NFL. And I think that he is that because he's so accurate, because he can hit on those big shot plays, and because he's such a great threat as a runner.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, the turnaround that they have had has been so historic
Yeah.
from last year to this year that it must be that a real special quarterback has entered the fold. I can buy that, but I'm still at 16. I'm
Okay.
still not going to put him quite at 11. There's some guys that, I think if you went from Sam Howell to them as well, they would probably go up in a big way. But
Oh, but would they be a top 5 offense,
would they?
Theo?
I don't
That's
know.
pretty
It
good.
depends
Top
on how
five's
it
pretty good.
happens. I mean, the first month of the season is really when they built their huge statistical lead over like everybody. They scored on
Yeah.
like
But they're averaging
what?
28
Like
a game in like their skid. Their 6
I mean, they just dropped 36 on what a lot of people
They
thought
did.
was the best defense in football.
100% that they did, but they have not been as good recently as they were at the beginning of the year. Like I feel like when you look at the reason that they're a top 10 offense, it's because they were scoring on like a ridiculous amount of their early season drives, like 75% of them
That
or
is
something like
insane.
that. And when Jaden Daniels was playing then, I didn't think that he had as much on his plate as he does now. Like I think that if Dak was the quarterback then, like he probably could have, hit some checkdowns and just, like
Sure.
not that it was all of that, but I don't know. I think that it was a little bit inflated. And I don't think that the Eagles game was the best game of his career because I think the Saints game the week before this was actually better than the Eagles game because of the picks.
Really?
Really, because of the picks. I mean, Jaden tried to give this one away. He really did. It was a fourth quarter, right? When did the second
Did
pick
you think
happen?
that pick was that bad? I mean,
He
3rd and
rolled
5.
out and like threw it across his
I know, but
body
there was
late,
kind of
and
a
it, like,
window
went
there.
right
It would have
to
had
the
to be a hell of a
guy.
throw. I don't know. I think you're
but
being
you can
hard
throw it
on
away. Like that
I
should have
know, but then
probably
it's
put
just a
it
punt.
away. And the pick before wasn't great either. I thought it was a bit more turnover prone. Like the Saints game, he took a ton of sacks, but I
Ton of
think that had to
sacks.
do with the pass protection plans more. Like I'm seeing Chip help that isn't helping, and then no one's out in the route, so everybody's doubled, and he takes a sack. I'm like, I don't really know what he's supposed to do in that scenario. Like he avoided all turnovers in that case. I thought he broke like a ton of tackles, made
Hmm.
some really high end throws without the mistakes. Really carried them to a win with a bad game plan last week. This week, I mean, he beat Kenny Pickett. I'm,
Oh my
I know he
God.
beat the Eagles.
He had to put
defense,
up
and the Eagles
36 on the Eagles defense with
But half of
29
that was
total yards
because
from
he
scrimmage that
threw
weren't from
2
him.
picks. He
No,
threw
his
the
teammates
picks.
fumbled 3 times.
I know, but the picks
This
were
is
what
hating.
made it worse
This
than
is
the
an
Saints
this
game.
is an agenda that you're driving.
What agenda?
here. No, I
Pro
know.
Jaden Daniels versus New Orleans agenda
Yes.
that I'm gonna push forever.
Yeah, to
like-
push an anti-Jaden Daniels versus Philly agenda. That's exactly right. No, listen, I thought he was great in the first half versus New Orleans. Like, awesome. I just thought they stalled out so much in the second half, and he did take so many sacks. But that's
they
an
like
interesting
miss a
take.
field goal or like.
It was a weird game. It was a very weird game. They should have won it by more than they did, probably with the level that Jaden did play at overall in that game. Okay, so we disagree on Jaden. You guys both have Hurts at 15. Logan, who's your number 14?
Yeah, I feel like consensus probably isn't going to be with us. I feel like a lot of people would probably have Hurts higher. I have Sam Darnold at 14, and I mean, I can't sing Sam Darnold's praises enough. I mean, he has won them games down the stretch over these last 6 weeks. He is playing damn near flawless football. He's making plays out of structure. He's on time. He's on target. And again, as I mentioned with Jalen Hurts, I don't want to be disingenuous to him when I talk about all the help he has with Smith and A.J. Brown and this line and Saquon. So does Sam Darnold. He is in the best offensive situation I think possible. Kevin O'Connell is brilliant. Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in the game. Jordan Addison is great. T.J. Hawkinson is great. Aaron Jones is great. Like, this is a great situation, but Sam Darnold's playing really good ball, and he doesn't scare me. I'm not as skeptical, I guess I'll put it that way, about Sam Darnold as I was at the beginning of this year. I really like his feel, his pocket presence, how he's dealt with pressure. I've been really, really impressed with Sam Darnold.
Theo?
Yeah, I've got him at 14 as well. He has charmed me recently. Maybe this is a bit too high. I'm trying to keep it in the back of my mind. Like he had a Jets game earlier this year that was like really bad.
Yeah.
It's just Rodgers was worse. And then I don't think I've seen the Jaguars game even still, that 12-7 game.
It was bad.
But I am box score watching and see 0 picks, 3 interceptions against one of the worst defenses in football. So maybe there is more of the old Sam Darnold in there than we think. And I'm worried that it will could show out come playoff time. But recently, he has been unbelievably good. I mean, some of the plays, like the most recent game against Seattle where he's climbed the pocket and took a hit and put it on Justin Jefferson's back shoulder. That was so beautiful. So the pocket movement before he hit the bomb to Jefferson versus Atlanta was pretty sick. He's been taking a lot of sacks recently, and that's still his big kind of bugaboo, but he has been money under pressure. He has layered throws in there. He has been a big positive for them, especially recently. And he's been one of the best quarterbacks in football over the last month. So we'll see if this 14 is taking that month too much into account. But right now, I think he's playing like it.
I have him one spot higher at 13. And you mentioned it, Theo. I mean, since that Jags game and the Colts game where he was also bad, he had that little skid because the Jets game was just a couple weeks before then. It wasn't very pretty. But last 6 weeks since then, I mean, he's been unbelievable. He's 15 touchdowns, 1 pick, just letting it rip. And just on the season, you look at the bottom line numbers, and it's 252 passing yards per game, 32 touchdowns, 11 picks, 8.2 yards per attempt, 105 passer rating. He's in a really good situation. There's no denying that, but he does have a lot of raw arm talent. I think the decision-making overall has been good. Like, that's the one thing where it's like, I worry about it compared to the elite guys, but when I compare him to my numbers 14 and 15, who I'll spoil, I have Baker at 15 and Geno at 14, decision-making is a big question with those guys too. I mean, those guys both attempt some throws that they shouldn't, and Geno, it's complicated because, I think his situation requires so much of him, but some of them, you just can't excuse. And both those guys have 15 interceptions this year. So, I trust Darnold's decision-making more than those guys. And I also think even, his mobility inside and outside the pocket this year has been better than I would have thought. I think Sam Darnold is really, really good, and I do think he's a little bit more dependable than those guys. So real quick, I'll just say Baker, we already talked about. I think his statistical case, I mean, the production is really impressive this year, but I do think if you put him in a Geno situation, if we're going to compare those two, that's where I think Geno does have more raw arm talent. He has a more accurate arm, and he's not nearly as jittery in the pocket, right? I mean, he hangs in there, and good God, there is no situation where it would be more justifiable to be jittery in that pocket because that offensive line is horrible. But, his pressure to sack rate is consistently impressive. The throws that he delivers behind that offensive line are so impressive. So I do trust him more in a shitty situation like he's been in. But then I think, if you were to drop Geno into the Vikings offense, would he be better than Darnold playing at this level? I don't know. You really think so, Logan? I think it's close, but Darnold is just playing such clean football right now. And I still worry a little bit about Geno just trying windows that he shouldn't. I love Geno. I've always been a big believer, but I think Darnold has just been so awesome, and the turnovers have been more of a problem with Geno than they have over the last couple years, where I've just been slightly moved, and I'm going to give Darnold a very slight edge.
Yeah, I mean, Geno's interceptions are bad, don't get me wrong, but and this is a tough thought exercise, but I just feel like Geno has to make up so much for this offensive line and has to do.
He does.
I feel the same way
Absolutely.
about Baker. I just think there's such a burden on these guys' shoulders where
I think
even with
Baker's
a Jared
situation's
Goff,
a lot better than Geno's.
even with a Jared Goff, who I have below those guys, I'll spoil that.
Oh, wow.
He's been playing great football. Don't get me wrong, but these guys have brilliant offensive minds. They have elite skill position talent. They have awesome offensive lines. I can't say that about Tampa Bay or Seattle, and so I just think those guys are more. You can't
say that about Tampa, though.
I mean, you can say they have a solid.
You certainly
O-line,
can't mention them
caller.
and Seattle in the same breath because Geno's in hell behind that O-line.
Yeah, I think they're one of the worst offensive lines in football, but to me, those guys are closer to being damn near one-man offenses than close to obviously not like a Josh Allen or a Lamar, but those guys are taking on insane workloads and they're producing and they're winning games. So I just appreciate that. I just think that Darnold, Goff, and Hurts, in my opinion, are in the best offensive situations in football. I don't think there's anybody that has it easier than those three guys.
Theo, what's your take?
I think one number I remember seeing from just the most recent Seattle versus Minnesota game that happened on Sunday is that Gino was pressured like, I'm riffing now, but it was like I think he was pressured 14 times and took like 2 sacks.
Yeah, it's so
And then
impressive.
Darnold was pressured 7 times and took 4 sacks. I think that is kind of the hidden difference between the two of them is like Gino really is doing quite a nice job when every single drop back is like a Saving Private Ryan opening scene.
Yeah.
It's pretty
true.
rough back there, and for him to sling it like he's slung it behind an offensive line that falls apart that easy, he is really playing on Dark Souls hard
Yes.
mode, and really the numbers compared. Well, I think Darnold does have better numbers, but I think I like Gino more than Darnold slightly.
I've been on that side. I mean, I've been a huge Geno defender. I really was defending Geno this offseason. It's just a little bit too much with the mistakes right now, man. It's just a few too many back-breaking picks. I still totally hear the case because, like, yeah, I mean, dropping Darnold from Minnesota to Seattle would be like the equivalent of going from Valhalla to hell. Like, it would be so much harder. But Darnold has been really, really good, and it's hard. It's tough to say. Like, this is one where situation is a big factor, but also the production like has been very different. Darnold has been that good as of late, so I could go either way with this. Okay, so Theo, who's in your 14 spot right ahead of Hurts? Oh, you have Darnold there, right?
Yeah.
So who's one spot above that?
Jared Goff.
Wow. Okay, let's hear it. Let's
I
hear
mean,
the
Goff
case.
is like cool. He can throw the digs between cover 3. The linebackers like split out, and then there's that little window there, and he can really hit that at a high level. But I think he's bagless. He's
Yeah,
a
it's
run and
fair.
jump man. He's play action man, in breaker man. Purdy was in breaker man last year, and we all ranked Purdy in the 20s. And I've got Goff here at 13. I love the confidence that he's playing with. He steps into every throw. His accuracy has been really notable. He hardly ever misses. He hardly ever gets passes tipped at the line of scrimmage. That's all nice stuff. But at the same time, I think he can throw you one sometimes by kind of the same thing with Tua, like expecting something to be open and it's not, and he'll throw like kind of an obvious pick. I think Ben Johnson opens up a lot, like a fake stumble, and then he turns around
Oh
and he
my
throws a
God.
touchdown against the Bears. Dishonorable football there, if I do say so myself.
Really? Are you anti-Stumblerooski?
I don't like Stumblerooski. I
Whoa.
think that it's like the Red Dead honor thing just went down for you there. Like
Hold on,
that-
but it's not though, because it's like
that sound
everybody's going to
effect
be
All's
trying
fair.
to kill you to get the
All's
ball.
fair, man.
It's not like everybody stops playing. They're like, "Oh my God, is Jared okay? He stumbled." They're like, "All right, we got to go get the ball now," but the ball's not on the ground. I
Why
love
would
it.
you call it then? You know that they're gonna let up and get their eyes peeking. Look,
Well, they're not letting up though. It's just like the most effective play action ever. They're
I'm not
all
saying
trying to
it
get in the
shouldn't work.
backfield.
Look, you could call it a million times, and if you win games, I'm not advocating for that to get taken off the board or anything. I just think it's dishonorable way to win.
I think it's fun. I think it's
What if
creative.
what if
Y'all
in
know
the
what?
NBA?
You know what I think's really dishonorable when like like guys go and spy on other teams' practices and stuff,
That
and
is
like they steal
dishonorable.
play sheets before the game
Okay, here, let me
starts
give you an example. Let me give you an NBA example. Like, it was a whole thing a year ago or 2 years ago that Jose Alvarado would literally hide after buckets so he could steal inbounds from unsuspecting players. That's not against any rule. That's just deception, man. That's
Theo,
just fun. I love it.
Do you think pick plays are dishonorable?
To some extent, yes. I mean, if your whole offense is pick plays, I'd be like, okay, this is ass. Like,
Is the tush push dishonorable?
No, I don't think it's dishonorable because that one is just like that one might be the most honorable play actually, just because it's you just push the guy forward in a short. It's no tricks. Everybody knows exactly what's going to happen.
But what's
And
wrong with a
it's-
trick? When a trick works, is there
There's
anything
nothing
more
wrong
wonderful?
with it. It's just it's slightly it's at some level it's dishonorable. Think about if the whole offense was built on rub routes.
like,
it would
do
be
you,
dishonorable.
Do you
So
dislike
one
a
rub-
hidden ball trick in baseball? Is that dishonorable? I think that's sick.
Probably.
I totally disagree. I think if
The
you can
stumble
deceive
is a
your
little
opponent within the
dishonorable.
rules, within the boundaries of the rules, That's good with me, man. You just outfoxed them.
It's fine. It's not fine. It just
no fun league.
There's some bad karma. With the football god, they might have to answer for it. It is true.
I will say, as a Bills fan, like when Ben Johnson down 3 scores or whatever schemed up a touchdown to Dan Skipper, I was like, all right.
It might come back to bite you in some karmatic way. That's what I mean by dishonorable, more than like they shouldn't be running it or there should be like a rule against it. It's just like from a karmatic standpoint, if you fake a fumble to score a touchdown, the ball might bounce left instead of right on a muffed punt and in the playoffs. And
Theo Ash has gone from not believing in momentum to believing in the karmic forces leading to payback on Ben Johnson for his greedy play calls.
What's wrong with that? But anyway,
that's fair.
I think Goff. This is all to say that Goff is in a very ideal situation. And I think in a vacuum, he's just the 13th best quarterback. I just don't fully trust him in some ways.
It's very similar to the Sam Darnold case. I have Goff in the exact same spot. I really like his arm talent. I think Goff is a guy that you can go back to the Super Bowl with. Obviously, we've seen it already. We saw him go to the NFC title game last year. This is nothing against him, but I do worry. Out of structure, and I do that same thought exercise. Let's do the Seattle. If I put Jared Goff in Seattle, Jesus Christ, Goff might be the most sacked quarterback in the NFL this year. Like, it's really hard to gauge these guys because he is playing. He's a great play action guy, man. Like, he's on time. He's so deadly accurate. But when you can get him off script and you can get him in a hole, it's really hard to wipe that taste at a 5-interception game out of your mouth. You know, It's hard to overlook that. And I look at other guys like Geno, for example. I just think they have more physical tools. They have similar arms, and I think he can do more with less. And so maybe it's not right to hold the fact that Goff and Darnold have these great situations around them, but I think that's how you got to evaluate them. So does that mean that is Goff a top 10 guy to you, Carson?
Yeah, I actually have Goff at number 9. It's the highest I've ever been on Jared Goff. Historically, I think I would have agreed with you guys. I just think he's reached the level of pocket passing to me where, like, he's right there with Dak. I actually have him one spot above Dak. I think that they are very similar in terms of, they're not going to be able to do much for you out of structure, right? Because, I mean, Goff is pretty much a statue, right? And yes, absolutely, he has lots of great stuff schemed up for him, but I think we've seen growth from him. I do think the mistakes, you cannot discount the possibility of that. And like, he has 10 picks on the year. He also has 1 pick in the last 6 weeks. He had 5 of those picks in one game. Like, it's lingering, but for the most part, he plays pretty damn clean football. And so, yes, he is in a good situation, but I just think he can let those throws rip over the middle of the field. I think that he's awesome on deep balls, and he's so consistent there where, like, I do view him as more dependable than even a Geno. And it's tough. If you put Jared Goff in Seattle, would I feel that way? I can't say for sure, but if you put Geno in Detroit, like, would he be as consistent as Goff? Would he avoid mistakes? I don't know. I really don't know. I think these guys are so close to me. Like, even 9 through 16, there's not that big of a gap. But I'm really impressed by Goff this year. And I think obviously the production, the efficiency pops off the page, but situation's a big factor in that. He's in an amazing situation.
What if I told you that Jared Goff is charted with a higher turnover-worthy throw rate than Geno this year?
That
according to
would
PFF.
surprise me. That would surprise me.
Geno's actually pretty low. He's at 22.
How is that possible?
Probably because he has the ball in his hand so much.
But, man, he attempts some throws.
He's at 22.
Just should not.
Now, if it's the red zone, it might be a lot higher, and that's what really is a killer sometimes with him, is he has thrown a lot in important situations when there's, like, a field goal on the board. I think that's what makes them so much worse is, like, the picks that he has thrown have been so backbreaking. But I do think there's something to the idea that, you know, Geno will get killed because of all the picks that he's thrown and the bad picks that he's thrown, definitely. But I do think there's something to the idea that it's not as bad as the general public is probably thinking now because he's so low
been on
the
that
turnover-worthy play.
That just surprises me because, like, I've been somebody who's argued that Geno is at the very least fringe top 10. I feel like he's made more bad decisions this year. And I feel like a lot of the picks are on him. And as you say, they are also in really bad situations. Like, he's left some points on the board in the red zone for sure, and they haven't been good on third down. It's close for me between these two guys, but I do trust Goff more right now. I do. Pains me to say I love Geno, but I also love Goff, actually. Okay, so who is next for you, Logan?
Yeah, I think we're all caught up to number 12. I have Kyler Murray here, and Kyler was a tough guy to rank. It's been an up and down year for Kyler. Like, there are some games this year that you just look at and you were in awe of what he's able to do, right? Like early this year against Buffalo, you see that play extension and him getting out of the pocket and making stuff happen. It's just inconsistency. And the reason I have Kyler over guys like Goff and Darnold, when the play breaks down, Kyler Murray can do something. He can scramble and get out of the pocket. He can make throws on the run, right? They always compared him to Mini Mahomes because of his scrambling ability and arm talent. I think it would honestly probably depend most on situation. Carson, I completely agree with the point you just made about 9 through 16. It's like people are always going to look at the top 10, and that's how they're probably going to judge the majority of our lists, who the names are. But it's not interchangeable, but it's very close between all these guys, and I don't have a ton of pushback if you have Hurts right, in your top 10 or right outside, or Darnold or Goff. They're all having great years. I just prefer Kyler Murray's individual playmaking, his ability to make plays out of structure. I think he's got a really good arm. And kind of like these other guys that we're talking about this range, he's had some bad moments this year with interceptions and some of the decision-making stuff. So it's really close between all these guys, but with Goff and Darnold, I prefer his scrambling and playmaking ability to those guys. Although I do have Geno above him. I think Geno's got a better arm. I like his physical profile more. I think he's got some of that playmaking. And I've got Jaden above Kyler too. I think Jaden's better decision maker, better at protecting the football, and I think he's let out probably just a better offense than Kyler's ever let out. And
better scrambler, dare I say, as great as Kyler is.
I think so too. So Kyler comes in at 12. He was one of the harder guys, I think, to rank on this list.
Who do you have at 12, Theo?
I've got Lawrence T-Law.
Oh, wow. I forgot that we hadn't gotten to T-Law for you. So why are you still so high on him?
Because I think Jacksonville is shitty.
Fair.
And I think they're extremely shitty. And I made a video after the Browns game of like all the things that I didn't like about the play design, and then I had like Jaguars people text me like, "You're right." Like people in the front office, maybe.
That's always a good sign.
So I've been on like the fire Doug thing all year.
Absolutely.
And I think like that will help because I think from the beginning it's just been a mess. And I think like their free agency was a total mess. Like they brought in Gabe Davis as the help.
You didn't like Gabe Davis?
The great Gabe Davis. I can't believe
Davis, 0 yards, 0 catches.
Josh Allen,
he's
he's going to be so much worse without Gabe.
That don't even get me started on Gabe Davis. I mean, now I just kind of feel bad for the guy because now everybody just knows that he sucks. But yeah, he's given them 239 yards this season for his $20 million. Hell yeah.
Christian Kirk has been like awful this year. Just in general, like the amount of big plays that get dropped for him is just unbelievable. There's like a 2-minute cut up of like almost touchdowns that he had from last year. It's crazy. They like let good defensive players walk for like no reason and just signed players who were like good against them for a game. It was just a terrible offseason in Jacksonville. And I think T-Law, his accuracy has been an issue, and fumbles and negative plays have been an issue for him. And eventually that has to get so much better. And it's hard to defend him as much as I do 100%. But he also got better kind of as the season went on, and then he got hurt.
Yeah.
He was pretty good for most of last year, and then he got hurt and kind of fell apart. I always think about how like him and Stroud's numbers ended up the exact same. The Jaguars' numbers like on offense on a per drive basis ended up being the same as Houston's last year. But by the end, people were ready to, throw out Lawrence and anoint Stroud. This year, you see like no one's quite immune to a really horrible situation or a horrible offensive line in Stroud's case or and play calling. And I think Lawrence has been suffering through so much of that over the course of his career. And I just am in love with the fact that he's it really just comes. He's 6'6". He's got a golden arm.
He looks the
He's
part.
super fluid and fast, and I think he's very aggressive downfield and makes, in my opinion, good decisions in an aggressive way that which can lead to picks when you have bad wide receivers and can lead to like bad moments sometimes. But I do appreciate the way he tries to dominate, kind of snap in and snap out, and tries to test some windows other guys wouldn't try. And I just have a lot of in the same way I don't like Baker's game or I don't like Tua's game. I just think that Trevor is like exactly what my quarterback should look like. So I'm just a big Trevor guy, and I think he needs to demand a trade out of Jacksonville or something.
Yeah, well, they got to fire Doug. They got to fire Press, and then, I don't know, start fresh from there. Give him a full year with Brian Thomas. Obviously,
Brian Thomas and, like,
sucks.
Not Gabe Davis.
Not Gabe
Gabe
Davis.
is so bad.
Oh,
He cannot
preaching to the
catch.
choir.
He cannot run routes.
Can't separate.
He, like,
Doesn't do anything.
He's so sloppy in the
Yes.
details. And Nate Tice had a good tweet this year where he posted like the exact same play twice, where like Trevor rolled out and tried to throw a crosser on the move, and on one the wide receiver flattened, and on one he drifted, and one looks like a dime from Trevor, and one looks like a horrible missed interception. And it's like, well, how could he ever be so inaccurate?
Yeah.
And then on one of it, it's like, well, maybe the receiver just wasn't quite on the path that he thought. There's a lot that kind of goes into it, and I think all the details just have totally escaped the Jaguars receivers for 4 years now. So I'm still a Trevor Stanny. We're
Dude.
still out here.
Gabe Davis is third to last in catch percentage this year.
Hell yeah, he's a monster. I think T-Law absolutely still has it within him to be an elite quarterback. He's taking the hypothetical man a little bit far for me to have him top
understand.
12. Like, I'm comfortable with him in that mid 16, 17 range where I've got him. And I think the ceiling is much higher because I don't think his situation has done him any favors. But there were games early this year I was like, T-Law, that's on you, man. Like, the
Definitely.
accuracy.
100% that he's been way too inconsistent. I heard
Yeah.
Ollie Connolly, one of my favorite analysts, compare him to like Eli Manning a while back, and that always kind of stuck in my head as like, oh, maybe he really just will never be that consistent. Like,
Yeah.
maybe it'll just
I think
never
it's too
come
early
to
to
fruition.
say. I think it's too
But
early
we'll
to say,
see.
but right now he's not consistent enough for me to have him up here. So actually, Logan, like you, I have Kyler at 12. I want to have Kyler higher than this. Like earlier in the year, I would have confidently said that Kyler was a top 10 quarterback in that sort of 9 or 10 range because I do think he's so impactful for team offense with what he does as a dual threat. It's a good year for him, 3,800 total yards. I think he's got 21 passing touchdowns to 9 picks. He's incredibly gifted with his arm talent, with his ability to move. I just wish he was more consistent. Like, I think that he is one of the more inconsistent players in this range, and I think really that's a big reason that the Cardinals as a team were inconsistent this year. And I think he's got good weapons in place. I think that James Conner is awesome. The run game is super effective. Kyler is unequivocally a part of that, but so is Connor. I like the receiving weapons. I like Trey McBride. I like Marvin Harrison Jr. I like Michael Wilson. Like, I like the group in totality around him. And he led a good offense, but he didn't lead a great offense. So his case over Darnold, over Baker, right, any of these guys you have in this range, especially like a Goff, who I do actually have above him, is Kyler's more of a one-man offense. I think you put him in any situation and he can salvage it because he's just such a dynamic creator. But everybody I have above him, I just trust him more as a pocket passer. I think is more consistent, and that's the reason that I have them above him. That includes Jaden. I just think Jaden is more efficient. I think he is more dangerous as a runner even than Kyler. I think he is a little more accurate. Kyler's got more of a raw arm talent for sure. Those guys are very close, but I think Jaden's been more consistent this year, even with the little lull that he had. He's been more reliable, and that's kind of my one frustration with Kyler. Okay, 11, Logan. Who do you have in your 11 spot?
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on any of the next three guys because we've talked about them a lot.
Yeah,
But at 11, I've got Geno. At 10,
Okay.
I've got Jaden. And then at number 9, I've got Baker.
Perfect. Wow, Baker at 9. I feel like we've already discussed that, but it does still stand out.
I mean, it might not be pretty. I get that Baker's more mistake prone than some of these guys, but for the most part, and that's why I'm so high on Jordan Love too, with these gunslinger guys that just make plays, I'll take the bad with the good, and I'd rather you be aggressive and make plays. So even though Geno, I know, can can throw soul crushing picks,
Mm-hmm.
Baker can do the same. Jordan Love can do the same. It's how their
Yeah.
season ended last year.
Yeah.
I'm gonna live with it. I lived and breathed through Ben Roethlisberger for a long time, and I'll tell you what, it ended up being way more good than bad. And so, live by the gunslinger, die by the gunslinger. I like what Baker and Geno bring to the table. I did think about having Jaden higher just because Jaden is so damn good at protecting the football, and that is important. I might do that. I think I'm actually going to do that.
Oh,
I'm going to
audible.
move. I'm going to move
Oh.
Jaden into my 9 spot. I'm going to move Baker down to 10 because I do prefer how well he protects the football, but that's the one adjustment I'll make. So I'll go Geno 11, Baker 10, Jaden 9.
Okay, Theo, how do you go 11, 10, 9?
So I've got Kyler 11,
Okay.
Geno 10, CJ Stroud 9.
Okay, so we have a CJ Stroud appearance. I have him at number 8. Logan, where do you have him?
I have
CJ.
CJ at 8 as well.
Okay, so we're all in the same range. Why do you have him here, Theo?
I just love everybody in front of him a lot. Like really, it's just kind of tough to slot everybody in, and then you get to Stroud, and it's like, well, he hasn't had the greatest year, and like I
Yeah.
said last year, like his numbers were more comparable to like Trevor Lawrence than like Joe Burrow this year or something like that. So I'm like, when has he really broken into like the top 5 conversation? When has that happened yet? I just don't think that it has. I think he's kind of sticking around this 9 range this year. I don't think there should be much hand wringing about him because even though it's been a bit disappointing, like Diggs got hurt, the offensive line has been a disaster. He could probably do a little bit more to mitigate that than he has, but I still think he's been pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. It's been sort of a mixed bag this season, a little bit of a disappointing sophomore campaign. Like the numbers aren't great, but he's just fighting such an uphill battle. The offensive line sucks. The run game's been bad. He's been down. key
Slowick's not that
receivers.
good.
I don't think that
I
Slowick
think.
is that good. And the receiver thing is going to be more of an issue now, obviously, with Tank and Diggs both done for the year. I just
They
still
just signed
trust
Deontay
CJ a
Johnson,
lot.
by the way.
Oh, that's going to work out. That's going to be great. Get him on the field
Logan.
immediately. Logan is so done with Deontay Johnson.
Good luck. Good luck.
If anybody can save him, it is CJ, and it is CJ through Jesus Christ, our Lord.
Yeah,
Christmas,
Lamar.
everybody.
Lamar couldn't.
Lamar wasn't in touch enough with Jesus. CJ is. I do just have a lot of faith in the guy. I mean, I still think that he's really good dealing with pressure. I think that he's not one of those elite creators out of structure, but he's a clear plus. He's really good. And I do think that he has rare composure and really does have that quote unquote clutch gene. Like he's just a guy who I trust to lead a big drive. He's so good from inside the pocket and he's good outside. So he is definitely not like separate from a Dak, for example. Like I actually really thought about those two compared to one another. I think where he does get the edges in his athleticism and the fact that I do think he can do more when things go off schedule. But I think he's pretty solidly locked into 8 right now because I think everybody above him is basically just a more dynamic talent. They have more overwhelming physical tools. They hit on more huge plays. And he hit on a lot of chunk plays last year, to be fair. But there's just a higher ceiling right now with the guys above him to me.
I agree with that. I don't have a ton to add on CJ, but I do think he's got a cannon of an arm too. Like he's in one of the best arms I think in football. And this year has been tough situationally. Now that teams can key in on the interior of the offensive line, they know how to game plan against them, and all the wide receiver injuries with Diggs, with Nico, with Tank. Now it's just compounding. But CJ's really good at protecting the football. He's really efficient, and I trust him. But I agree with you about everybody above him. I just think they're all different levels of playmakers, and that's why I prefer him to CJ.
Okay, so Theo, who's in your 8 spot?
In my 8 spot, I've got Dak.
Yeah.
I do have Dak, and I think last year is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I think, and not just last year. It's not like last year was his only good season. He's been at a pretty elite level since like 2019 or so. Obviously, he was set the league on fire back in 2016, then kind of was in a lull for a little bit. But since we were all like freshmen in college, I feel like he's played at a pretty elite level, and I just think. I don't want to be too quick to forget what he did last year.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about him compared to, Goff. Well, How about Goff has an elite offensive line? He has Monty and Gibbs. Not only does he have Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he has like at least Jamison Williams to stretch the field on the boundary. Dak, he's a great pocket passer. He put up, a better offense, or an offense that's just as good as the Lions are now. He put up this better numbers than the Goff has now, with no outside boundary help, with no run game.
It's true. It's totally true.
With like Jake Ferguson is his second best weapon. It's just him and CD magnet ball, and yeah, he just is a very ideal pocket passer. He's not too far off from Burrow for me, except Burrow has been to the Super Bowl and Dak has not. But even then, it's like, did Burrow play that well at that whole playoff run? I don't know. I just don't think there's like as huge of a gap between those two.
There is. There is.
Oh, you think there is?
This is so funny. This is so
Burrow's
funny.
special. Dak's not. That's the difference. Burrow is so special, man.
Theo, I said I think Joe Burrow is closer to Dak Prescott than he is to Josh Allen. I actually regret that. I just said last show that like I walked that take back because everybody's been coming at me for that. But I think that also came from two places. Number one, I'm extremely high on Josh Allen as an all-time offensive engine. Number two, I think I'm much higher on Dak than the average person. I mean, you're even higher on Dak than I am, but I think overall we're similarly aligned here. Like, I also don't want to forget about what Dak has done. It's just this year was rough. And the situation was, but some of his decision-making was bad, and I am worried about the mobility getting worse and continuing to get worse. But you're right. I mean, Jared Goff has never done what Dak did last year. I think he can have like a Tom
Brady style of play, though. Like,
yes,
what was Tom Brady's mobility when he was 44?
Zero.
Like, I think Dak's game can age like that, because that's kind of how he's been playing recently, even without the mobility.
I think so too. I think that's a good take because he is such a pure pocket passer, but like he used to have a little bit of ability to move around.
He definitely did.
He's lost that.
He used to be one of the best out of structure.
Yeah. But even like if you look at last year compared to this year, I feel like I noticed a difference. So I think some of those injuries and aging has just accumulated. Okay.
But,
yeah. Go ahead.
I'll shut up.
No, don't you even say that. But we have been going for probably close to 3 hours, and at some point I want to let you go.
You may want to release this in 2 parts, Carson.
I was considering it, but I think maybe this will just be our Christmas present to everybody and our Hanukkah present to everybody. The longest podcast in the history of mankind. Logan, who do you have next?
I have got Jordan Love.
At number 7.
At number 7. Love is one of my favorite guys to watch in the sport. Like, my quarterback's most fun to watch. It's the big four, I think. It's Mahomes, Lamar, Josh, Joe, and then it's Jordan Love for me.
Stafford.
Love. I like watching Jordan more than I like watching Stafford.
Jordan Love clears Mahomes in terms of watchability for about 2 years now.
I also think Stafford clears Mahomes and Burrow for me.
Mahomes is at low-key bottom 3.
I mean, yeah, actually, I only kind of threw him in there. The 3 is Josh, Joe, and Lamar for me, and then maybe Jordan. I love the guy, man. I love the guy.
He's your gunslinger.
Man. He is so much fun. He is. If Mahomes didn't exist, Jordan Love might be the perfect quarterback, man. If the big 3 didn't exist.
Okay, there we go.
I love Jordan, man. He's audacious sometimes and a little bit too audacious. It's like I said, the reason he can't be higher is because he just slings the ball so much where he will put it in harm's way. But every game, there's no quarterback in the sport that hits on more big shot plays than Jordan Love, and they swing games. It's like, that's the beauty about the Packers offense. Don't get me wrong. It's better than it's ever been before because they have a guy like Josh Jacobs in the backfield. But that offense can be sputtering for the whole first half. And then the third quarter, he comes out and he hits on a 60-yard bomb to Christian Watson, or he'll hit on a 50-yarder to Dobbs. And you're like, okay, well, that's flipped the game on its head. I love that. It just happens that the 6 guys above him are probably top 15 to 20 quarterback talents of all time. Like, that's the only reason that Jordan Love can't be higher than this, is because all of those guys are such great individual talents, and I think all of them protect the football better than Jordan Love. So that's the only thing that keeps him from being higher. But Jordan Love is special, and I refuse to hear any other opinion on him. If you don't like Jordan Love, I don't think you like football or Toyota-thon.
True. Theo, where do you have your darling baby Packers quarterback?
So I got him at 6.
Okay.
He's the GOAT, man. He may put the ball in harm's way. However, he might have the best sack avoidance, like in NFL history. He has a lower Mahomes is like famously good
Josh
at
Allen,
avoiding sacks.
2024 Josh Allen.
What is it? What is he at?
Josh has a lower sack rate than Jordan Love. He's the only guy.
Is he the only one? Because Jordan is at 3%.
Yeah.
And last year he was as a first-year starter. Last year he was at 4.9. So two really elite numbers in a row gives him a career average that's just astronomical. Yeah. Only Allen has been better at avoiding the negative plays this year. If you talk fumbles, picks, and sacks, like that's where the hidden value of Jordan Love is like, yes, he has thrown picks this year, definitely. Some of them were because he tore his groin up and week 1, and I was thinking he was going to miss the season, and he played through it, and like that was clearly hindering him. He's been turnover free for the last month.
Yeah.
But
magic of Toyotathon,
it's
man.
the Toyotathon. Are you familiar with the Toyotathon theory, Theo?
I'm extremely familiar with Pablo Escobar's Toyotathon theory. I think that it's hilarious that it might get Toyotathon extended.
It ends on January 6th this year. I checked.
I think they're going to extend it for Jordan Love, and he's going to make Toyota like millions in profits is kind of where I think this is going to dovetail into. But yeah, I've got Jordan Love at 6. Every time he gets blitzed, it's hilarious because most quarterbacks think I got to get the ball out fast. Jordan Love is like, I got to make the free rusher miss and like throw it into the end zone.
Yeah.
And it's like,
he's awesome.
Okay, dude. He's got a lot of Josh Allen particles in him. Like Josh Allen is an even evolved version, but from the moment he took over as starter, like I remember tweeting like in October of last year, like Love has more Josh Allen particles than I thought, and this is when Love was not doing that great. Yeah. People were like, "You're crazy for even uttering those two in the same breath," but it was really true. They're just the ultimate
playmakers,
just rip your heart out creators.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've been on Jordan Love, right? So I think that's a win for you because he's been awesome, obviously. I have him at number 7. I actually think it's really close between him and Stafford. I do have a little bit more faith in Stafford as a decision maker, but that's not to say that Stafford doesn't also throw some bad picks where he's overly audacious. Like, I think that's the one thing that you knock against both these guys, but Love is an explosive play machine. You mentioned the sack rate is incredibly low, and it's the Toyotathon, so he doesn't turn the ball over at this time of year. He's cut out like the one question you have about him. I just think he's awesome. I think he is truly an excellent quarterback, but Stafford has been doing it for so long. He is such an unbelievable arm talent. As good as Love's arm is, Stafford's is even better. I mean, Stafford is up there in that tier 1 with Allen and Mahomes still, and I do trust him more as a processor of the game. I just think what Matt Stafford can do when it comes to executing flawlessly within structure and then also making those just like what the fuck throws. Like, he's the one true creator in the sport, in my opinion, who isn't like that sort of mover, right? Who does it just
he does it with his eyes, 100%.
Eyes
like,
and arm.
Just if you watch a Rams game, they'll like zoom in on him making reads. It's awesome. He's like clearly trying to get people to bite just with eyes alone. I mean, the guy hit a no-look pass to win the Super Bowl where he looked off Von Bell and hit a cup over the middle. So, yeah, he doesn't have the like make the free rusher miss throw into the end zone that Jordan Love has, but he does. He is just as difficult to deal with as someone who can just manipulate a second level guy.
He's incredible. I mean, he's the biggest reason that the Rams are the scary football team that they are. I mean, shout out McVay, shout out the offensive weaponry, but it's Matt Stafford, man. Scares the absolute shit out of me. Where do you have him, Logan? Do you have him at 6?
I do.
Okay. Shall we move into the top 5? Gentlemen, are we ready? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Logan, who's in your 5 spot?
I'm interested in where you guys are going to have him because I know this is a perennial debate every single year. Where does he rank among the top 5? I have Justin Herbert, and it's interesting, right? Because now this is the down year for Herbert statistically because he's doing less than ever before because he's got a really great coach. It's the best defense they've ever had. It's the best running game and scheme that they've had in general. It's also the worst receiving talent he's ever had, right? Because the first few years of Herbert's career, he's handcuffed to one of the worst coaches in football in Brandon Staley. But he's got all this receiving talent, and he's putting up 30 TDs to 10 picks every year. And I still think he's got the second most passing yards by a quarterback in their first 5 seasons, just to Peyton Manning. The reason I prefer Burrow to Herbert, because I think that's the debate that everybody points to, and some people will go Herbert has more creation, and that's why I want him. Joe Burrow is one of the best pocket operators I've ever seen in my life, and he's also just like, he's a perfect QB, man. He goes to bed at 8 o'clock every night. He eats a big fat meal. He just prepares differently. Like, football is this guy's life. Quarterbacking is his passion. This is what he was meant to do, and he's a genius. And I just think Joe Burrow is one of the 15 most talented quarterbacks I've ever seen. I still don't know if he gets enough credit for how great of a pocket operator he really is. I know everybody goes with the Drew Brees comparison. To me, and nobody's ever going to do this because he is an anomaly of the sport, the closest thing that we have to Tom Brady in the sport today is Joe Burrow in just terms of play style and how they operate and the things that they do within the pocket and how they manipulate defenses. It's Joe to me. So both of these guys are great. I think they're all-time talents. I marginally prefer Joe to Justin, and it's because of that pocket manipulation. But I could also hear an argument where you go, oh, well, Joe still has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and that aspect of it. So this is a nuanced debate. I've always been Burrow over Herbert, and I still land on that side of the fence.
Okay, Theo, which side of the fence are you on?
I've always been a Herbert stan. It just has been my thing, and I'm still gonna go with it here. I've got Burrow at 5, Herbert at 4. Really, the top 5 is so clear.
Yeah.
And Herbert definitely has the worst statistical case of all the 5, easily. But it's pretty easy to explain why. The best wide receiver he's ever played with is Keenan Allen a couple years ago. It's just Josh Allen has gotten to play with maybe the best wide receiver in the sport for a time. He got Stephon Diggs. Jamar Chase is maybe the best wide receiver in the sport. Joe Burrow has put up crazy numbers. Lamar has, Derrick Henry to be a force multiplier. Mahomes got to play with the 2 best receivers in the sport, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce for a time, right? So why was that passing offense so good? Herbert just has not had any sort of situation where he can put up numbers like that. He can play as well as some of those other guys. He just can't put up numbers or wins as much as those other guys because, they got the receiver, the football equivalent of like Giannis to throw to, right? It just is.
Yeah.
It's a different situation. I actually think Herbert reminds me more of Brady than everybody else. I think that Herbert, when I think of Joe, I think of like, he's kind of deceptive. So is Herbert, I guess. But like, there's like some quickness with Joe. And I think like his arm strength, like it doesn't matter because he puts it in the right spot all the time and just sees the game so well. But like, I don't think his frame and his arm is quite as much like Brady as like it is with Herbert, who's like 6 foot. Like he's just an absolute mammoth out there. And that's kind of what Brady was. And then the other thing about Herbert that people will criticize, and it's also what gets criticized with Brady, is like, oh, Herbert, he's a check down merchant. He's famous for throwing for the running backs. Eckler was the fantasy QB running back 1 for so many years. Like Brady kind of had that mentality as well, where it's like he'll push it downfield if it's there, but he would never turn down a good check down. And Herbert kind of plays like that as well. He's too big. He shakes off sacks. His arm talent is out of this world good. It's on par with Allen in my opinion, in terms of velocity and things like that. I mean, the throw he hit against the Broncos, like falling down. Of course, Burrow just threw a touchdown falling on his face as well. Yeah. It's tough to pick nits. I've just always been on the Herbert side, and I just haven't really seen enough this year to ever change my mind. Like Herbert would have to like fall off in some way. I just want to see him with a real elite. I want like Garrett Wilson to demand a trade there this offseason or something. Like someone who I think is really high end. Even Garrett's not as good as Jamar, but
Jamar's an absolute freak. And T, for being a number 2, is an absolute freak. So you guys have both had your consistent stances on this debate. I'm just the complete opposite. I've flipped a million times, and I'm going to flip
It's
one
a
more
Burrow
time
year.
from where I was at preseason. It's a Burrow year.
It
This
is.
is a Burrow year.
It is
so
a
I'm
Burrow
going to
year.
have Burrow 4, Herbert 5 right now. These dudes are so close, it's ridiculous. I mean, that's why I've flipped. It often does just come down to who is playing better in that stretch, and I do think that Herbert has been awesome. I mean, I think his ability to avoid mistakes has been incredible. The long stretch that he went on without throwing a pick. He's got the lowest interception percentage in football. Like, that sort of efficiency and that ability to take care of the football in this offensive system is really impressive. Obviously, it's not a dynamic offense, but I don't know how it could be. He's got all the physical traits. I think mentally he's very, very smart. The one thing I do like about Burrow is I do think he's got bigger balls. And like you mentioned, Herbert and some of the check down stuff, right? I'm good with it because I think he controls the game really well. But maybe this comes when he has better receiving talent. I do think that Burrow is a more aggressive player pushing the ball downfield. And it's like, yeah, he's got Jamar busting dudes' asses, right? So I think that that's definitely a part of it. And T, who's just a mismatch
notably
nightmare.
good if it, in contested situations.
Absolutely. One of the best jump ball guys that you've got. So that's a fair point to make. I do think that Burrow's more accurate. I think that Herbert's got the bigger arm. I think that they're both honestly quite good as movers, not in that elite tier, but legitimately good. I'm leaning Burrow. I just think the production this year is so ridiculously explosive. But like, if you put Herbert in the same offense, I think the production would be just about identical. I think they're neck and neck as football players.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the best the quarterback position has ever been, dude. It's so close with these two guys. Like, I don't mean hyperbole when I say that. Like, I think that all the top 6 are top 20 talents of all time. It's special. It's special what's going on with the QB position nowadays.
It is special. The one thing I will say about Joe, because I think there are some people who will want to argue him at 3 or 2, is he's not the offensive engine that
100.
Lamar
I completely
and Josh
agree.
are.
That's the argument.
That's the thing. With what those guys do as dual threats, with what they do out of structure, it's just on a different level. And those guys don't have Jamar. They don't have T. Higgins. And yet the Bills have had a better offense than the Bengals every year of Joe Burrow's career. The Ravens have consistently had better offenses when Lamar is healthy. Like, those dudes are just special, all-time great elevators. Truly, I've said, Theo, I don't know what your take is on this. I'm interested because I've said this to Logan. I think there's a strong case that Josh and Lamar are the 2 most impactful regular season quarterbacks in NFL history because they just lead you to be elite offenses no matter what with how constantly they stress defenses.
Yeah, I agree with that. You could put them in any era, and like Lamar is, I'm taking Lamar over like Fran Tarkington, you know, like it just is.
I think we can agree on that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm taking Lamar over. Yeah, a lot of players in NFL history, just in terms of like you drop them in an offense with a coach that like has any idea of what to do with him, and it's just too much stress. What they can do with their legs, it's just too much stress.
I mean, the stats that I always recite: the Bills are the number 1 scoring offense since 2020 overall, and they've done that without consistently super impressive surrounding skill position talent. Obviously, this year everybody declared that Josh was going to fall off, the Bills were going to fall off, and it's the best offense they've had, and it's been the best offense in terms of points per drive in football. And Lamar, the Ravens score more than 28 points per game when he's on the field since 2019, and they score 16 points per game without him. Like, it's just such a pronounced difference, and as good as Joe is, he doesn't have that, right? The offense with Jake Browning was functional. They scored like 24, 25 points per game. Obviously, there's a big difference, but it's not to that level with Josh or Lamar. So that's why I feel that those guys are above. The reason I have Lamar at 3 is, although I think he's having one of the great quarterback seasons that we've ever seen, and I think he's the best he's ever been as a passer, and it's just been incredibly efficient there and is the greatest rushing quarterback we've ever seen. I do have a different level of faith in both Josh and Lamar, or in both Josh and Pat compared to Lamar when it comes to the postseason, when it comes to winning in multiple ways, when it comes to winning when you can't really dictate the game on the ground, when you do fall behind. Like, I'm not saying that Lamar is bad in those circumstances, but is he as good as those two? No. And I think the postseason resume reflects that. I think how things have gone when the Ravens have lost the Steelers game, the Eagles game this year, like, they all reflect that. There is more of a formula that Lamar needs to execute, and when he does, I mean, they're as good as any offense ever, and he's just about as good as any quarterback ever. But when it comes to plan B, plan C, that's where I prefer Josh and Pat.
That's why I would hear an argument for Joe Burrow over Lamar when it comes into a playoff setting. But for a regular season setting, I don't think it's close. And that's where I lean on. The dynamic you were talking about, because it's not just the team offense that they're producing, right? Because both of these guys put up points. It's the way that Lamar wins that you're talking about, how he can go on these prolonged drives of 7, 8 minutes in a half that takes down the clock. They score points. It is this snake-like vice that Lamar and the Ravens offense can put you into that Joe just doesn't have. And I think, again, his rushing threat, too, I think opens up, the same thing with Josh, opens up so many things in the running game with read options. And it's different this year because Lamar has Derrick Henry, but that is the dynamic that I would hit on. But I think that you could make an argument that the two greatest offensive engines ever, Lamar and Josh, man, it's a real argument that you could make.
Theo, who do you have at 3 out of the big 3, so to speak?
I've got Mahomes right now at number 3. I mean, it's kind of scary to say that, and I don't really think that he's worse than those two, but like he is worse this year, like 100%.
Definitely.
So that's why I'm putting those two ahead of him at this moment.
That's ballsy.
Like,
That's ballsy.
I know.
Who would you want
know.
going into a playoff game? Is that
Mahomes.
what you would have? Mahomes at 3?
This year, I think I'd like. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I have like full faith in Lamar Jackson going into the playoffs. I cannot.
Did you have that
There's
last year?
no statistical basis for this. I just think that the regular season is going to lead us to playoff results. I just think it's too good. He's going to get a wild card game this year, which he never has really had before because he was hurt when they played the Bengals during the Sam Hubbard game. He's gotten the number 1 seed 2 times. So I feel like that is going to help him in terms of like getting his playoff numbers up. And even last year, like if Zay Flowers doesn't fumble, it's a completely different ball game. I know that he wasn't at his best versus the Chiefs, but the Chiefs dispatched the Bills in that playoff run as well, you know. So
It was a very different look from the Bills offense than the Ravens offense.
It was 100%. But I don't know. Like they didn't have any running game in that game. I think they ran it like 5 times total, which is
like
just
6 or 7.
Handoffs to the running back.
100% silliness from a game planning standpoint. The Flowers fumble. I think Lamar is playing the best football on earth right now. I do. I think it's a little bit even better than Josh Allen, especially after the New England game. I think he has a slight edge this year, and that's why he's just my number 1 right now. He's hardly throwing picks. A lot of the picks he has thrown have been like bouncing off receivers' hands. His rush threat is just different than anybody else in NFL history. Like I would put him in tier 1, and I don't know, as good as Allen is as a runner, I don't know if I'd put him in Lamar's tier as a runner. And as a thrower, I mean, what's not to like this year? He's avoiding turnovers. He's hitting big plays. The addition of Derrick Henry has just put everybody in such a blender that even though there isn't maybe an elite wide receiver here, it's still one of the most efficient seasons in NFL history. And I think I think he's been unbelievable. And I really, really hope it's going to translate this year to postseason play. Yeah. I get holding it against him. I do. But I just think people think they know and they get so comfortable, like just writing it off. It's like, oh, Lamar just chokes in the playoffs. But then what if 1 year he doesn't? I mean,
totally.
It's you never know.
That's not the thing for me at all. My expectation is not at all that Lamar chokes. In fact, last year I thought, hey, he's so good as a passer now. This is a different Lamar. It's going to be a different postseason for him. And then it wasn't. And that's only 1 game, so that doesn't define him at all. I don't think there's any doubt that Lamar is capable of going on a generational playoff run where he tears everybody apart and they're able to play exactly how they want. They're able to get up and strangle these games, and he's just out of this world. That is totally possible. The thing is, do I think that is as likely as Josh or Pat doing the same? Not quite, and that's the difference for me. And I do think that the playoff resume is reflective of that. And I know that there are some people who sort of put Josh and Lamar in similar conversations where they haven't gotten it done in the playoffs. But the difference between Lamar with his sub 76 playoff passer rating and 6 touchdowns, 6 picks, and having really struggled overall compared to Josh, we always talk about these numbers, but 26 total touchdowns to 6 turnovers in the playoffs since 2020. The Bills have been the number 1 playoff scoring offense in that time. He's averaging the most yards and touchdowns per game of anybody in playoff history. Like, there's just nothing about Josh's game that doesn't translate at the highest level to me, and we've seen that over and over again. And I think this is unequivocally the best Josh that we've ever seen. This past week is a bad game. I thought it was a bad game for the Bills offense in totality. I thought the receivers really, really struggled. Like, I thought Josh had 2 pretty awesome throws to Khalil Shakir that he dropped. One in the end zone. It was kind of a 50-50 ball. I mean, he had it in his hands, but that was a tougher catch. There was a beautiful play at the end of the first half rolling out to his right that Josh dropped right in the bucket, and Khalil just like totally misjudged it, which is very uncharacteristic for him. But like, that felt like the rare game this year where you're like, oh, this isn't a team that has a conventional number 1 receiver. And in spite of that, again, they're the number 1 scoring offense in football in terms of points per drive. They've been incredible in third down. They've been the best fourth down offense. They've been really good in the red zone. Josh, I think, is as good of a third down and red zone quarterback as we've ever seen in the history of this game. And they have been better taking care of the football than anybody else. Josh has done a better job of avoiding sacks than anybody else. He has been at his best in games where they've beaten teams that nobody else has beaten, if that's the Chiefs, if that's the Lions. Like, I just think the control of the game that he has right now, the composure and the ability to limit negative plays more effectively than anybody else in football. Like, what I've always said is, if you got a Josh Allen who was like the least turnover prone and was better at avoiding sacks than anybody else, what's stopping that guy from being the best quarterback in football? And that's the Josh that we're seeing right now. So he's my number 1. If you have Pat number 1, I totally get it. I mean, I would argue it's like my expectation. Yeah, I think that Patrick Mahomes peaked higher than any quarterback we've ever seen. Right now, I think Josh is better. I do. And if you have Lamar at number 1, I get it, because the MVP race, dude, I mean, it's been so close to me. But like, if Lamar surged ahead for you this past week because he was really good against the Steelers defense and Josh wasn't good, that's totally fine by me. I understand it because he is such a one-of-a-kind threat. But like, Josh to me just has the combination of generational ability, incredible control of the game, and it has translated to the postseason before, and he's even better now. Just has everything that I want. So he's my number 1.
I'm baffled. So we all have 3.
This is actually really cool that we all have a different number 1. Yeah. I like it. We all have the same number 32. We all agree that Drew Lock is the fucking worst, but we all have different thoughts on which all-timers number 1. I love it.
Yeah, I've got Mahomes 1. I'm not ready to pick against him yet. I mean,
I get it.
I still think he's the Grim Reaper. I wouldn't bet against him. They're still the number 1 third down offense in football. Like, and that's what I've always stuck by is situationally, in a big moment, in a big spot, a big play, there's no guy that I want under center more than Mahomes. But this is special. I think, and this has been a growing one, but like I said, I don't think the quarterback position has ever been better than it is right now, man, in the history of the sport. I think we're spoiled.
Well, we just saw all of it. We laid it all out there, 1 through 32.
We didn't. I'm sorry to keep you here so long, Theo. Damn, man.
God bless you,
Good
man.
God.
God bless you. This is our longest pod ever. Any final thoughts from anybody? I mean,
No.
This debate about We've said it all. We've said it all, man. Well, Theo, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, this was a delight to debate Gardner Minshew versus Desmond Ridder versus Aiden O'Connell. And then I'll get all the way up to the top. But everybody go check out Theo. Go check him out on TikTok, Theo Ash NFL. Go, of course, listen to the Stay Hot podcast with all of our pals, Theo and Matt Sponauer and Bladen Kirk. And go check out the Pro Football Network. Theo's doing stuff for them. Just go support the boy. He's awesome. We love him. We've known him a long time. And wonderful guy and an amazing content creator. So obviously he just gave us so much of his time. He deserves now some more of your guys' time. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope it's a little source of Christmas cheer for you all. If you want more of our content, it's on our YouTube channel. All of our NBA and NFL stuff. We'll be back the day after Christmas, reacting to all the Christmas Day sports, NBA and NFL. And if you want more of our content, you can find all of our trivia stuff across social, TikTok, Instagram, at NerdSesh, Twitter, at Nerd_Sesh. You can also see graphics. I think we'll get a graphic up of everybody's quarterback rankings. I know that might have been a little bit difficult to follow. I doubt you exactly remember all of our rankings 1 through 32. If you do, you're a savant. But if you want a refresher, you can check out the graphic when we have that up to accompany the show. You can check out our Discord if you want to join, be part of our community. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. And you can check out our merch if you want. That is also at our link tree and at breakingtea.com. So one last big shout out to Theo. I already offered him a chance to say any last words, so I think that we've moved past that. We've yapped ourselves out. With that, as always, I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
Let it rip, Theo.
I've been Theo Ash.
And this was Nerd Sesh.